second meeting of the Committee on Finance to hear the budget briefing of the Department of Trade and Industry and its attached agencies, except for TESDA, excluding TESDA and APECO. It's called to order. We'd like to acknowledge the presence of our colleagues. Senator Frank Drilon, the minority leader, is present, and Senator Marcos, the vice chair of this committee, is also present. Secretary Lopez of the DTI is here. Yusek Macatoman, Yusek Lantayona, Yusek Castelo, Asek Cabodsan, Asek Caberde, Asek Bautista, Asek Abrenica, Asek Hepti, Asek Pacheco, Director Cruzada, Director Arceo, and the attached agencies, Design Center, Director Matute, CDA Chairman Yusek Encamo, SIAP Executive Director Gacho, and BOI Director Recolizado, and PITC OIC Ebriega. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And we'll turn the floor over to the minority leader for any questions he may wish to direct to Secretary Lopez and the DTI officials. May we request those who are not speaking to mute their microphones, please, so we can have a clear and orderly discussion.
Yes.
Thank you. Senator Drilon, you have the floor, Minority Leader, Your Honor.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Hold on, I'll just put off the other. Can I have 1 minute suspension, friends?
Yes, meeting is suspended for 1 minute.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As it will be recalled, in the last hearing, we asked for a number of data which involved basic questions. For the record, Mr. Chairman, I must say that the submission is so inadequate. What the Secretary did was just to dump on my lap, on our lap, gross, data which is not even processed, and it is not processed. In the few instances that they processed it, even the English was so bad I could not understand what they were saying. Mr. Chairman, the basic questions I asked in the last hearing could not even be answered with adequately. So, I am forced to say that the Secretary has shown disrespect for this committee and this representation for having submitted raw data, which is not even reviewed. I expected him to assign this to a subordinate, but I would have expected him to review the submissions of the subordinate before submitting it to this committee. What happened was that he just dumped it all on us, Mr. Chairman.
Let's hear from the Secretary is raising his hand. Let's hear from him. Secretary Mon, yes?
Thank you. Can I be heard?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Your Honor, Senator Drilon, and the other members of the committee. Actually po, we prepared so much for this. following the questions raised by the good senator and the other members of the committee. In fact, we prepared a PowerPoint chart that would hopefully answer the questions raised by Senator Trilon, the chairman, and the other members of the committee. So with your indulgence, if you will allow us, actually the charts that we prepared actually answered a lot of the questions that was raised by Senator Trilon. It in a table format because we believe that it will be easily detected the kind of, let's say, ang basic question po niya last time, yes, may growth tayo, pero sino pa yung mga nahihirapan sa ngayon and which are the industries really that are still suffering? Kaya po we process a lot of data. We looked at GDP, we looked at exports, we looked at FDI, we looked at employment, labor. Lahat po yun talagang pinaghandaan, pinag-aralan para ho ma-assess natin talaga at maibigay sa Senate Committee yung nire-request na data. It is really a product of a lot of work from all the people in the DTI. With due respect, talagang pinipreparean ho ito. Tinanggal na ho namin yung mahabang explanation and we really limited it to the table para ho talaga makita ho talaga. That's why, Mr. Senator, Mr. Chairman, makikita nyo may red color, may green color to really detect kaagad sino yung mga nahirapan.
Okay, I will listen. We will listen. And personally, I will listen to the presentation. But what my impression is created out of what was submitted to us. For example, I asked the question in the last time, how many jobs were lost as a result of the pandemic? A very basic question. And the answer on the basis of what we received is as follows. And if I may invite the attention of the chairman, if he will help me understand what it means. Question, how many jobs were lost? Answer of the DTI. Based from the monitoring of BOI, the following were the potential result. However, the delineation of having specifically exporters is limited on this portion and not mentioned in the DAX details, as not mentioned in this portion. I cannot make heads or tails of this. That is why this is why I have created this impression, because I could not really understand, what is being submitted to us. The submission to my queries, they are very raw, they are unprocessed, they are incomplete, parang cut and paste. The sources are based on news reports, Word file, whatever that is. It is unclear. The sentences are unclear and confusing. That is the sample that I read. Hindi mo po maintindihan eh. That is why I am so disappointed. I had, I was already a little disappointed that basic questions could not be answered in the last hearing, but I gave the secretary, I said, all right, let's better prepare. And when we got what was said, I got more confused. So that is why. But I'm willing to listen to what the good secretary has for us, and we will listen.
Sige ho. Thank you po, Senator Drilon, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Meron ho kami prepare talaga na charts for this, and hopefully this will answer the questions. Our apologies, Senator Drilon, because yung mga nabigay po kasi kahapon dahil nirarush po kami ay some of the annexes. So they may not be the exact answer yet to the question. But we will present to you, Mr. Senator, we will present to you the answers to your question.
So you realize what kind of data you submitted yesterday. You said it was not meant for us. I'll accept that. That is so.
Meron po kaming yung pinaka-summary po, which is what I will show you, Mr. Senator.
Okay, sige.
Sige po. Please, na lang ho, pasensya na ho sa mga nakita niyong papel, but this is the summary and hopefully will encapsulate all your questions. And talaga hong pireparean ho natin ito dahil gusto naming masuportahan talaga ninyo sana ang ating budget for DTI. One page lang po ito on the budget para lang to recall what we presented last time on the budget we're asking for. This is basically the NEP for the DTI. I hope you're seeing the chart on screen. Paki-share lang yung naka-share na. Okay. Okay. So dito po, you can see that the total budget of the DTI and the entire family, including TESDA, which has the biggest budget. For the DTI proper, let's refer po sa letter A, which is the Office of the Secretary. That is, it has a total of 6.6 billion. That's the only budget that is being presented here, Mr. Chairman. And this only accounts for less than 1%, 0.14% of the entire budget of the NEP of the government. Now, moving on, diretso na po tayo dun sa questions po na ni-raise ng ating mga kagalang-galang na senators. And dito po, as mentioned, marami ho kaming tiningnan para ho talaga ma-validate to the question, ano talaga yung mga nag-suffer na mga companies, mga industries, alin din yung nakakita rin naman ng growth. And the table is meant really to summarize and in a cleaner way. Hindi na po kami nag-write up because it is really easier to see the table. And in fact, we even looked into the start 2016, 2017, hanggang the latest 2020. And dito po, makikita po natin that the Philippine economy has been growing at an annual average growth rate of 6.6% noong 2016 to 2019. But of course, the pandemic hit us, the lockdown. It started in March of last year, 2020, resulted in an economic contraction of minus 9.6% in 2020. So talaga hong nahirapan at bumagsak ang ating ekonomiya. And in terms of decline in value, makikita ho natin yung decline sa construction, in terms of value ho, construction minus 388 billion, manufacturing, transportation and equipment, real estate, wholesale retail trade, kasama na po lahat ng mga supermarkets and sari-sari stores, contributed to the total output decline. In terms of the magnitude of decline, ito po yung malaking porsyentong decline. Accommodation and food service, understandably, yung mga hotels and restaurants, food service, kasi sila ho yung talagang most of the time sarado, especially the hotels. And then the food service, yung mga restaurants, madalas open, close, and most of the time close, especially during ECQ. Transportation and storage, warehousing, logistics, construction, mining. So kindly refer lang po dun sa red. Practically ho, all are red labels, red. So madali yung makita. Practically everything declined in 2020. Dalawa lang ho ang nakasurvive doon, information and communication, finance and insurance. That's the reason why ang total po minus 9.6. Moving to the next chart, if we evaluate naman yung 2021, the one that shows, so yung kinumpare naman natin, after the 2020 decline, na halos lahat nag-decline, but from 2020 to 21, you will immediately see that the economy, nung nag-reopen po, there's generally a recovery. So the last column, dito ba last column ito? For a while, Mr. Chair. I'll just double check the table being shown. 21, 20. Yes, Mr. Chairman. So the last column will tell us sino yung nag-recover from 2020 to 2021. You will see that a lot are in white background. Only 3 or 4 are in red. So immediately we can see that kahit dapat nag-recover na ng 2021, there are still that are not able to recover. There are still sectors. Minimally, the agriculture, forestry, and fishing. I mean, minimal in the sense na halos nag-grow din kasi yung agri even in 2020, but there's a minimal impact in terms of magnitude. But the big magnitude would be in transportation, logistics, storage, accommodation, again, the hotels, and other services. Sa other services, included po dito lahat ng services on whether barbershop, salons, spa, all the SMEs, karamihan po sa other services. And there is a minus 18% decline in a year 2021 that's supposed to be the year of start of recovery. So it shows na nagre-recover, hindi pa rin po hindi pa rin sila nakabawi itong 2021.
Secmon,
Mr.
hindi
Chair?
ba yung more important column is the third to the rightmost column? Because that shows that whether we have gone back to pre-pandemic levels, di ba?
Tama po.
Yung 2019 versus 2021. That's the column that will show whether we have returned to pre-pandemic. Because if you're just looking at the 2020 versus 2021, you're suffering from the low base effect, di ba? Kasi
Yes,
you're
sir.
from a low base. So, syempre, you will grow, di ba?
Yes,
So,
sir.
I think the most important one is the third to the right column in terms of knowing where we really are.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Actually,
Can you walk us through that column and what are the plans of the department, Jan?
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman. The second column from the right
Correct. Yeah.
indicates the real growth if you have as your base 2019.
Yes.
If you look at that, 2019 first half versus first half of 2021, your base is 2019. It's a negative growth of 6%. Is that correct, Mr.
Yes.
Secretary?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Actually, dun po ako papunta eh. Inuna ko lang yung 20 to 21. But
Okay.
ang next po talaga is that the real test is yung mga nag-grow, nakabalik na ba sa pandemic? So,
Yeah.
actually, tama ho kayo. That's the reason why yun po talaga yung next statement. In the total, you will see na hindi pa ho nakabalik sa pre-pandemic because right below, you will see minus 6%. So, generally, again, the total will tell us hindi tayo nakabalik. Sino po yung mga talagang dun muna sa nag-grow ng 2021 at tuluyang better than pre-pandemic. Ito po yung, again...
Before that, Mr. Secretary, to me, the second from the right column is most important. When do we expect to have a growth based on 2019 growth?
Okay po.
Prediction.
Okay ho. So maybe a quick answer po from me. A fearless forecast could be the second half of next year pa, 2022 or 2023. If you're just looking at the trend, because they were the ones who suffered huge during the pandemic of 2020. That's why kahit mag-grow sila, they're not yet back to the pre-pandemic.
Okay. Are we saying that we will see a growth in next year or year after next?
Yes, sir.
See a growth compared to 2019, or you will see just a recovery of the size of the economy as of 2019?
We're hoping, Mr. Chair, depending ho sa kind of reopening that we are doing, if we will continue and not have disruption like the Delta variant that hit us, and continuing reopening, and of course the high vaccination rate that we expect to hit over 70% nationwide before the end of the year, we would expect a continuous momentum of growth. Yun po ang talagang, frankly po, we were expecting that already, if not for the Delta. We were expecting that for this year to have at least kung hindi man zero recovery, imbis na minus 6, ay sana nag-recover tayo talaga this year. But nevertheless, as the chairman mentioned, there is a positive growth for this year because of the low base last year, but certainly we're still below pre-pandemic. So kung ang tanong po, pre-pandemic level, may not be this year, but maybe next year. So if I may just continue po, we can look at all the white in the second to the last column.
Yeah. Before you continue, I just want to acknowledge Senator Nancy Binay. I see her on the screen.
Good afternoon, Senator Binay. So yun po, tama ho si Senator Drilon, talagang the second to the last column and the third to the last column, as mentioned by the chair also, are the important parts here kasi this tells us sino pa yung hindi nakabalik sa pre-pandemic. And pwede ho nating isa-isahin yan. Ang malaki ho talaga dito, again, transportation and accommodation. Yung mga malaking impact, malaking tama.
Mr. Secretary, why is agriculture, forestry, and fishing suffering? I don't see it being affected by the pandemic. Transportation, I could understand. Accommodation, certainly. Real estate, certainly. But just give a little explanation. Why should agriculture, forestry, and fishing suffer?
Alam ko ho that they are still reeling from the impact of the earlier supply situation sila, the ASF, the typhoon that hit in the last quarter of 2020. I remember the impact on the production that probably have spilled over to the 2021 first quarter, especially. Kasi ho, if you remember, the agriculture is the only sector that grew in 2020. Baligtad po. Lahat ng manufacturing and services declined. But agriculture grew by about 1% point, 1.5, very up near the borderline, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So may tama pa rin po sila, and I think it's really driven by their supply issue, the disease, ASF, and those production issues. But if you look at, of course, I'm not from DA, but I remember some presentations given by Secretary Da, especially when it comes to mga rice production. Mas malaki yung ang yield per hectare reported right now this year dahil ho nagkikick in na yung inyo pong rice tarification law and yung support to the farmers, etc. So for agri, minimal po yung decline. Ang talagang malaking decline were in the accommodation, the hotel, tourism, restaurants, services, other services, and the logistics, Mr. Chair. So if it's okay, I can move to the next chart that basically shows naman, this focus naman po on the manufacturing. So ganun po kadetalyo yung aming prepare na sagot po kay Senator Drilon at saka sa mga senators. So from the overall GDP, within manufacturing, sino-sino ho ang mga tinamaan talaga ng malaki? Again, coming from the previous year, the manufacturing, looking at the bottom of the second to the right column, 2016 to 2019, ang average growth 6%. Yung nakabilog po 6%. But when 2020 hit, sila po nag-decline ng minus 9.8%. May isa lang nakalusot na manufacturing. Understandably, pharmaceutical products. Yun lang ang nag-positive noong 2020. Moving into the similar analysis po natin, I will go direct to the second to the last column because yun po yung talagang inyong tinitingnan. Comparing 2021 and the pre-pandemic 2019, may mga naka-recover. The wood, bamboo, cane, rattan, mga nakabilog po. Chemical, pharmaceuticals, base metals, computer, electronic, furniture, kasi po, I think this is the demand for work from home. Marami ho talagang nag-increase ng mga orders abroad, especially as people work from home, yung mga para sa bahay nila. And then other manufacturing. But you will see po, on the overall, it's still minus 3.2%, below pre-pandemic. So again, manufacturing, while there is some growth in 2020 of 10.4%, it's still below pre-pandemic. So yun po yung summary lang po tayo dito sa manufacturing.
Sec, I'm trying to understand the third to the right column, the 2019, the pre-pandemic pag parenthesis negative, di ba? Kung naka-parenthesis, that means it's negative ho, di ba, Secmon?
Opo. Meron bang...
So there's only one product sector that's in the positive, that's pharmaceuticals. Everything else has not recovered from pre-pandemic levels. Is that correct? That's my initial. It's my first time to see this chart, but just looking through that third row, food products negative 44.6 billion, beverages 27.4 billion negative, all the way down, no? The only positive is pharmaceuticals. So our manufacturing capacity is way below. Tama ho ba? Below pandemic levels.
Ano yung nasa kanila? I will, ito ba ang nasa...
It's on the screen, Sec. You might want to look at it. It's what you posted for us on the screen.
Hindi, itong sa
It's
manufacturing.
the column that says 2019 and 2020 difference. So
2019 and 2021. Ito. Sorry po. Hindi nyo na-change yung screen. I'm sorry, I apologize. It should be this chart po. This chart. 2019 versus 2021. The second to the last chart. Baka hindi na-switch yung screen. Ito
yeah,
yan.
you share it with us, please, because it says 2019 and 2020, so that should probably be better than that a little bit. Ayan
Okay po. So apologies, hindi na-shift ng screen.
Okay.
Screen
So there
turner.
are more that are positive already. Okay.
Meron pong nag-positive, marami pa rin yung negative. The second to the last column. Minus 3.2 ang bottom line, still behind pre-pandemic. So we recovered versus last year because of low base. Moving on to the export, we can go quickly po. A similar analysis para again, this is answer to the question of Senator Drilon on the exports. Overview ho muna, we looked at the past 5 years. There's been at least we're hitting in the vicinity of close to or over 60 billion. May isang taon na nag-70 billion dollars tayo. These are merchandise or product export. There is a dip in the 2020 because of the pandemic, but the CAGR, compounded annual growth rate computed is positive 3.2%. Moving on to the next chart, this is a much longer horizon. It tracked also the export growth from I think this is the monthly, and we already see here that from 2020, sorry, you will see towards March, April, it dived into minus 41%, yung pinaka lowest point. But again, month on month, it continued to recover, and there was a point in March and April and May this year, it even reached the peak of 74% growth. But anyway, instead of looking month on month, let's look at the year to date. The year to date, this tells us sa headline po, this tells us a year to date 2021 of 20% recovery over the last year. But meron akong but dito, Mr. Chair, kasi but it will tell us also later that this recovery of 2021, if we look at the value, and there is a chart after, Mr. Chair, I mean mga 3 charts after, that this has a better number than 2019. In totality, naka-recover po yung export. This is one sector na it's better than the pre-pandemic. But I will go into the details, Mr. Chair. And just quickly, to answer the question, so ano yung mga tinamaan na mga sector, yung detalye po, no? So the next chart, please. Ito, ayan na. Exports of 31 out of 60 commodity groups grew. These commodities account for almost 80% of the value of exports in 2020. Highlighted are the products that continue to grow in the last 2 years, even in the midst of pandemic. So merong mga nag-grow pa rin in the midst of pandemic, those highlighted. Now, next page. On the average, the exports have been expanding by an average of about 3.5 billion, but there is an encircled amount there. Yung pag-total na ho ang tinignan, including those that decline, ang average increase lang po ay 1.9, close to $2 billion per year. Next chart. And to show you the worst performing categories, ito po, I think we mentioned earlier wood crafts, yung furniture, nasama ho dito only because I think the big part of the woodcraft furniture is our exports to Japan initially, especially at the time when a big company exporter, HTI, got burned, nasunog po, and they are a major, I think they account for more than one half of the export figure for woodcraft and furniture. That's the reason why it took some time bago ho talaga nagkaroon uli ng ng export figure. I mean,
Saan po yung naka-head? Where do they have their production? Sa Cavite ho ba yan, yung HTI?
Cavite yata to, no? Cavite, Mr. Chair. Cavite, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
And
Just-
this is...
Mr. Chair, what is CAGR?
Compounded annual growth rate po, Mr. Senator.
Compounded annual
Growth rate. Opo,
Okay.
parang, okay ho. So, parang ito ho, inanalyze ho, ano talaga yung, hindi lang sa pandemic, yung over the past 5 years, para ho ma-appreciate natin na not all exports are good. Some are already suffering even before pandemic. So, and so we that's the reason why we continue to do many things already with the limited budget of what we can do on the export, addressing
Just,
this export.
Mr.
Just take a
Chairman?
moment, Secmon. Sandali lang,
Yes,
Nancy, I just
yes.
want to make a point. Secmon, I just wanted to flag these last two charts you posted because although it's a top export, our top export products, a lot of them are very, if you use the Hausman Complexity Index, they're very not complex,
Not
very
advanced.
simple.
Not advanced.
So, walang value added masyado. So, going forward, baka you can prepare something how to reap more value added because a lot of them are raw materials, etc. Yun lang, I just wanted to flag that. Yes, Nancy?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ang tanong ko lang is, may mga products tayo, Mr. Chairman, na even before the pandemic, parang may problema na dun sa growth rate. And,
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Mr. Senator.
And then I would assume before the pandemic, meron na kayong kumbaga plan how to change this. Tama po ba?
That's right po. That's why part of the export plan on the overall is really, and this is where we need your help from the Senate. How can we support the manufacturing base? Because kung wala tayong napoproduce, wala naman tayong i-export eh. Kung kulang ang ating manufacturing base, kahit anong export promotion, will be difficult. It will be difficult. That's the reason why it's important for the country to continue to encourage investments and build more manufacturing capacity here. So especially dito you can see the iron and steel, copper concentrates, all these, and to the point of Mr. Chairman, yes, important po yung further value added, more complexity, and it seems that about 2 years ago when you introduced that, Mr. Chair, we've been using it also as our guide in really developing how to value add on many industries, hindi lang simple processing. So the last few charts will contain that, Mr. Chair. So if I may continue po.
Please go ahead, Sec.
Okay. Ano ba tayo? So maybe we'll move to the next chart, worst performing commodities and the average annual decline in the value. Hindi ko na po isa-isahin, it's really summarized there, and analyzed and summarized. The aggregate average value of decline in exports was $1.5 billion, which dragged down the total increase in exports of 3.5 billion. Kaya po yung kanina natin sinasabi, kaya ang annual increase lang ay $2 billion average annual increase. When you look at sino po ang mga top export market for the past 5 years, you can see here already a consolidated presentation. It will be Japan, in the order of Japan, China, US, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Thailand, South Korea, and then so on and so forth. This is our top 10 export markets already account for 84% of the total exports. Except for Taiwan, the Philippines has preferential market access in these economies. through FTAs and GSPs. In 2020, despite COVID, Philippine export to China, Vietnam, India increased, while Philippine exports to the rest of the world declined. So meron pong resilient at meron karamihan nag-decline. I need to point out, Mr. Chair, two charts before this, or three charts. Yung kung meron ditong that accounts for 84%, on the two charts before, the one that showed the top performing commodities, you will note that number one po doon, electronic products, they account for 62%. Just that sector alone. So ibig sabihin, it's really important on how they behave, how they grow or get affected. It will pull up, pull down the entire export performance. Ito na po yung next chart.
One question, Secmon, one question lang. You
Yes,
mentioned the electronics. There is a semiconductor shortage in the world. Do we produce that? Do we produce semiconductors?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chair. We do produce and we see that as opportunity. But in discussing with the industry sector, the real problem actually, as they are wanting to increase capacity, and in the past, kaya po mataas ang growth ng semiconductor, they've been increasing capacity, but with the shortage in other parts of the world, hindi rin sila naka-grab ng that entire opportunity because even the machines that will make it, may shortage then. So even if our exporters would like to ramp up their manufacturing, and they can do that, there's also a shortage of the equipment. So, but if you look at their growth, they grew more than 10%, I think 19%. So in a way, nakakaano sila. They're growing above average, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, Secretary Mon, which industries do you think can be considered as having opportunities for growth, given what we have seen, global construction of the economy itself? What would you consider as, say, for lack of any other description, sunrise industries, and which ones would really face rough times in the next 5 years?
Thank you, Your Honor. Offhand po, the quick answer there po is electronics is still the way to go because moving forward, we're moving into the digitalization age. A lot of equipment, machines are all related to electronics, and it is the reason why even in the recent years, electronics, the one, despite the huge base, is the one exhibiting the high percentage growth. Normally, pag huge base, maliit na lang ang percentage growth eh. But electronics is very, very, I guess, we're very optimistic. And the kind of electronics we have here are the ones that are also improving on their value add. Before, it's the common perception, electronics, konting value add, export na. Right now, we are part of a global supply chain. Everybody, like Singapore, Malaysia, they're all doing certain parts. So ang laban na lang, how much value add can you add to that certain part? Can we put in more R&D? Can we put in more design? We have the power of Philippines is we have a lot of engineers graduate. Every year we have 790,000 graduates. We have about 30% of those are in the STEM, science, technology, engineering, math. So maganda ho yung, in fact, a lot of R&D companies are being set up here. Like recently, Dyson, Philippines, they set up last year. They are expanding this year. They're adding more engineers, local hires, R&D, and this is to the point also of Mr. Chairman na ito yung mga complexity that's being added. That's the reason why pagdating din po sa Global Innovation Index, there is one criterion that's where we rank number 1 or number 2, as in I think that's high-tech trade, high technology trade. That is because of our strong point in electronics. So quick answer po is the electronics. Of course, anything that's high value added. The creative is one, sunrise, creative industries, high value, the gaming, software, graphics design. You can include the film, lahat po ng game development, lahat po ng mga software. Marami ho yan, mga 10 ho kasi yun, ano? Those that are IPO oriented, in other words, merong intellectual property ownership, these are the potential high export of the future, because these are the strengths of the Filipinos and the Philippine industries. If you look at the other parts here, they may look quite simple processing like cathodes, because ever since we're just doing the minimal processing. But right now, our investment trust is to further value add, invite companies that will further process the cathodes from copper. So these are concrete measures that we are doing so that we can value add on the existing commodities, so to speak. So more
There's also a copper shortage, no? But the demand is
yeah.
huge. So how are we faring in that respect?
That's the reason why ang copper prices has gone up to close to $10,000 per metric ton. It used to be just in the 7,000-8,000. So
But
because of the
we're a net
shortage,
exporter of copper. Or
yes po, we are. That's our number. Kung ilan tong copper? 3 or 4, I think, Mr. Chair.
right. And then the supply is going to grow incrementally, di ba? Because of batteries, etc.
Exactly po. Exactly. That the future of electric vehicle, to the point of Mr. Senator Drilon, Your Honor, yung sinabi nyo kanina, no, that's the other point of the electronics and all this resource base.
Yeah.
For
Okay.
the
I just want
battery.
to, with the indulgence of the minority leader, I just want to ask a
Go ahead.
question with respect to electronics. We're exporting a certain amount, but what is our net position? How much do we import for electronics?
We have a positive net. But kasi we value add eh. Definitely we have a positive net value add. In fact,
What is it in peso or dollar terms, Sec?
we will get that in a while, Mr. Chair.
Okay, sige ho,
It is
sige ho.
measured actually the export numbers that we have comes from central bank, which is called BPM, balance of payment something, which nets out the imported. So ano na siya, value add na siya, Mr. Chair. So
For electronics.
For all our export numbers that we monitor, so we can give the BPM version to show you that these are value add, less imports, Mr. Chair.
Now, give it to me per industry, Secmon, kasi we may be exporting the parts, but we may be buying them back. Di ba?
Opo. But kung just in case we buy the imported inputs, with the value added, we export more. There is still the
Kaya ngayon tanong ko, Secmon, is it a net positive with respect to electronics only?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right.
And they're still the biggest, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
if we look at the BPM.
Yes. Can I follow up the question of our chairman, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary? You know, it reminds me of the years when garments and textiles were our principal export, and yet when you analyze the value of the export, you will notice that ours is only value added in terms of labor, which is very small as a percentage of the total gross export. Are we looking at the same thing insofar as electronics is concerned? In other words, the value added is our manpower because we have no manufacturing insofar as this area is concerned.
Ano na po, naka-advance na po tayo. Maybe in the past, that has been the common perception. But now we have, yung kinikwento ko kanina, a lot of factors are put in, not only labor, the design, the engineering part of it, the productivity part of it. And you will be able to see that with the BPM. I mean, we will give you in a while and share with the senators, with this committee, that it shows a positive number. We'll submit it in a while, Mr. Chair.
Yes, I'd like to join my chairman in finding out what is the value of the imports on electronics and what is the value, just very simple, value of the exports. Because there you will see the difference, the value added insofar as our Philippine jurisdiction. So it is Yeah, I'd like to join the chairman in looking at that data.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since if you look at the quantity of our actual number ito, so hindi pa to net out. Okay. So just for example, Mr. Chair, this answer. So far, the imports of electronics, this would be the inputs, the parts, 19.3 billion. The exports of electronics is 43.4 billion. So it's more than double, Mr. Chair.
That's the imports of inputs, but what about the finished products, Secmon?
Well,
kasama na ho ba yun?
kasama po. Ito na ho yung nilabas. Whether as finished product, if we are the last touch, or if we are just part of the value chain. Because as you know, many companies are just part of that global value chain.
Yes, I understand that, Secmon. But my question is, you're saying there's the import figure is 19 billion and the export figure is 43 billion. My question is that a comprehensive import figure for electronics? Does it include all the Samsung, all the Apple phones we buy from abroad? Does it include all the LG TVs we buy from Korea, for instance, or Vietnam, wherever they're produced?
Yes, Mr. Chair, yung question kanina na all electronics.
Okay, all right. Senator Jolan, you have the floor, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I just noticed that of the 10 top exports, electronics with other electronics would be how many percent? That's 2,000, average of 22, assuming 22,000 or whatever, 223. The rest would be in single digits. Ang layo. So we're just totally dependent on electronics. And this is affected. This is, pag bumagsak ang
Yeah.
pagsak ito.
Correct observation po. We're really, well, in a way, we can say that this might be also prepared for, even in the past, na we invested a lot of electronics simply because this is the future and we are riding on that growth. And as mentioned, this continues to be the future because everything is turned into digital, Internet of Things, for IR. All these are inputs to this. So actually, we're on the right spot.
Maybe, how about services? Regarding this question of the point of the minority leader, saan papasok dito yung services ho natin?
Okay.
How does it compare in terms of figures siguro?
Tama
yung sinabi ni minority leader where maybe we should, I think his point is we should be diversifying.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so maybe I can continue with this chart to answer that question.
Go ahead, yeah.
Your sa next page po, next page. So to answer the question, yung services, no? Yung sa electronics po muna, and you will see here yung naka-yellow highlight are also the non-electronics that have a good trend. In other words, growing fast. And we can, what we're saying...
Wala pong yellow dito. Blue and red pa lang po nakikita namin.
No, yellow font, yellow...
Ayan, meron akong yellow.
Yellow line. Cathodes, other minerals, the pineapple products. These are sectors also that have a good growth, posted growth both in the pandemic of 2020 and 2021. Ibig sabihin, all those non-electronics, we will continue to push for it. Basically, everything, we try to value add, we try to increase domestic capacity. So, meron tayong i-export. Hindi lang puro promote. And the next page also shows us all the yellow highlighted rows, the other growing sectors that are resource-based. On the service sector, Mr. Chair, we will give you this, but I will just...
Can you just go back to that previous slide? That's really something that should cause us some concern. Pakibalik mo lang. Okay. What is the of this the top 10 commodity groups? Electronics is 22,223.3. What is this as a percentage of the top 10 of the total?
Of the total, electronics is 62%.
62%.
Opo, of the total exports, merchandise exports, goods, ibig sabihin goods. Kasi sa services,
62%.
yes, Mr. Chair. Sa services po, can you share the chart with sa chat group? If kung meron man. So we will share the table, Mr. Chair, but I can quickly just discuss sa services, ang bottom line ho dito, services is one sector where we are strong. They also account for almost a little lower lang than the 65 billion magnitude of goods. Exports reached 41 billion in 2019. It declined in 2020 na pandemic from 41 naging 31 billion. But since 2016 to 2019, it grew actually from 31 billion, 34 billion, 38, 41, up to year 2019. We will share this, Mr. Chair. Bulk of this is other business services. Ito ITBPM, no? ITBPM, basically, we're the number 1 or number 2 in the world, Mr. Chair. So we are the go-to. Right now, the ITBPM, they're one industry that did not lay off. At least meron ho tayo industry that continued to hire. They grew about 2% year to date, but they're looking at about 5% growth. The wins in the ITBPM, tulad din ho ng export in goods, they are allowed to operate even during ECQ at 100% operating capacity. So it was really an intentional move in the protocols when we were discussing the IATF because of the critical nature of these two high export oriented and the commitment, of course, to the foreign business community. And that's the reason why they continue to perform above par. And in the services sector, dito po we're doing very well. The other services,
What percentage is the ITBPM of the total exported services?
17 of 41, maybe 30%. 17 of 41.
That sounds like closer to 40.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Chair. Yeah,
okay.
Closer to 40. So
what makes up the remainder, Sec?
So if you will allow, Mr. Chair, we'll just go to the next chart para we can complete the details.
Sige po, Sec. Sige po.
Again, these are the groups that had strong export growth. Doon na tayo sa susunod. Those that yung still recovering are basically nag-grow sila ng 2021 over 2020. Okay, of course, everything declined in 2020, nag-grow ng 2021, but the last column tells us that they're still below the 2016 to 2019 average. In other words, hindi pa pre-pandemic level. So, nakasummarize na po dito. Lahat ng mga, so iniisa-isa ho yan. Again, in preparation for the data needed by Senator Drilon and company. So talaga hong inanalyze isa-isa yan para makita sino yung naka-recover ng versus last year, sino pa yung hindi pa naka-recover.
Basically, no one has recovered based on this chart.
Correct po. But ano po to?
Nobody has recovered based on this chart.
Ito po yung, pinili na po ito. Hindi to lahat ng exports. Pinili na natin yung mga, those that are still recovering.
Still recovering.
Okay, still recovering. O, sige.
Sa susunod
recover.
Yung sa susunod, still struggling. Ibig sabihin, even in 2021, bagsak sila. Hindi sila nag-improve from 2020. That is the second to the last column. Kanina, positive no? Itong second to the last, now negative pa rin. And of course, more negative versus pre-pandemic. So, yung mga banana, gold, tuna, seaweeds, iron ore, mangoes, they did not at all grow in the 2021. So, yun po. Next chart, I think this is the last chart on exports that summarizes the top markets, Mr. Chair, top export market, and the products per market, top products, top export. So number 1, US, number 2, China, 3, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore. So that's usually the top 5. Pag pinagsama-sama ang EU, actually, Mr. Chair, umaakyat sila sa top 4 or top 5 pag all the EU countries. So it's a major market. Okay, so we go to the next chart, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
On
please.
FDI, we understand also there's the inquiry from the senators on the FDI. So the numbers that we got actually showed us, again, good improvement, but kahit nag-improve, may sector na tinatamaan. So yun po yung gusto natin sabihin dito. The good news here, actually po, that medyo busy chart, no? But maybe I'll just summarize.
It looks like the eye chart of my doctor, the last line.
Sorry po.
Yung hindi na nababasa. Yung last line na hindi naman na nababasa kahit may magnifying glass ka.
Kaya nga ho, meron ho kasunod na chart yan na sinamarize yung last 2 columns po. But this just will tell us na at least itong FDI story ng ating bansa, may mga improvement naman po over the years. No? If you look at medium term, in the past, nag-average tayo ng mga 3.6 billion annual average. In the recent years, nag-average na tayo ng $7.3 billion. The other good story here, Mr. Chair, the first half of 2021 is a big rebound sa first half of 2020. So, as you know, sabi nyo nga, expected yan. But it showed 40.7% growth. If you look at the first half
Can we analyze the figures a little bit? Why was the peak in 2017 and then it declined, Secmon?
Ay, opo. Ang assessment po namin dito on the overall, maybe at that time, there were some discussions already on changing some regime. Incentives regime. I think that there was so much noise that affected in a way. But still, we're still in that level naman, Mr. Chair. So, karon akita natin may effect. So, nung napasa na yung create, we were saying nga na at least nawala na yung mga usap-usapan, uncertainties. Kaya it was really important na pasa nung February of this year. May impact din po yan. And of course, the continuing discussion on liberalization ng ating mga foreign equity restrictions sa mga ibang sector like retail trade, PSA, na nirarush po ninyo ngayon sa Senate. So, ito po yung...
Senator Drilon is the sponsor of the PSA, co-sponsor.
Yeah. Thank you.
Co-sponsor. And he's the minority leader also. So,
what will happen to that bill, Mr. Chairman? I do not know if we will come out better than where we are today.
What's the expectation, Sec Lopez, Secmon, dun sa second half of this year? Will it be like the first half or better or worse?
Before that, Mr. Chair, looking at this, how do we compare to our neighbors?
I think next chart po.
How far are we? Is there a chart here? Comparing ourselves here.
Next chart po. Next chart pa. Babalikan na lang natin ito. No, next chart pa. Para yan. So summary na lang ho kasi the chart before this is medyo the chart before this will give us the chart before. Yan, it will give us, kasi maliit na naman, pero para ipakita yung detalye that you want per country, per year. So, versus the other ASEAN, the neighbors. It will, so we move to the summary, the next chart. So this will tell us the period before and the current period will tell us the Philippines, yung naka-pink line or red line. Our average before was about 3.5 billion. The rank is usually 6. We started with 7, nag-improve sa 6. I think we ended 2015 number 5. So nung in-average po, number 6. Yung at least yung recent po, that the recent performance, nag-improve naman si Philippines, naging 4 na. We're not the top. Mahirap palaban yung top, Singapore. It is a far number 1. Yung susunod po, Vietnam and Indonesia. Yun na lang ang tinitingnan natin ngayon na paano natin maunahan. At least maging number 3. But at least we're number 4. We're in the upper half. Dati bottom half tayo. So that's an improvement, and our annual average is already 8.7.
Can we look at the year-to-year chart? Can we look at the year-by-year chart?
Yes.
Sec?
The chart before. The year-to-year, it tell us we grew from sa Philippines row 1.2, 1.8, 2.7. Nag-increase po every year. 5, 5.6, 8.2, then 10.2, 9.9, and then na-notice nyo yung pagbaba ng 8.6. But the 2020 was a reduction because of the pandemic. 8.6 to 6.5 is about 24%. But our reduction, I looked into the world number, our reduction is much lower than the 43% reduction in the world. So, kumonti talaga yung FDI by 43%. But now, at least tayo 24%. But of course, now we grew 40%. So, medyo ano naman tayo, we're not the last, we're probably in the upper middle. Upper half. Upper half. So, yun po, by versus the neighboring country. So, and of course, we are optimistic kasi there's a lot of improvement in our investment regime. Remember, ito po yung ating parating challenge. When the foreign investors go to us, they look at many things, and essentially, I think it will be addressed later. But normally, ang nare-raise, of course, the equity ownership issue, restriction, yung uncertainty, especially the years before create. If we compare ourselves with Vietnam, maybe it's very difficult because Vietnam is right beside China, just the same boundary, actually. So Vietnam is like an extension of China. So it's so difficult to compare ourselves with Vietnam.
What happened to Thailand, Sec? Why did they decline?
I think they declined because of the uncertainty, yung maraming protest.
The military coup.
Yes, Mr. Chair. They're affected by that. And we see that happening now in Myanmar. No, so there's another one that declined. Also, Malaysia had some leadership issue, I think, at some point in time. So, nagkaroon din ng loss of confidence. And fortunately, in our case, we were not taking advantage of that, but we simply pushed for our own promotion and improvement.
Can we get just a report on Singapore? How are at very high level, they're still doubling their exports in the same span of time. So walang diminishing returns in their case. Can we just get a short report, not now, but in the future on that? What they obviously studied it very well, no?
Yeah.
Because they've weathered all types of storms, and there's no case of diminishing returns in their case.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we'll do that. So duly noted. The other considerations being looked at is, of course, Indonesia population, the huge times 3 natin, but at least we're pretty good because we have a large population. We're next to Indonesia, tayo nang tinitingnan. So that's an advantage in a way. Mas lamang nga lang sa Indonesia. The CREATE did a lot because another issue was the corporate income tax rate. We were the highest, but with the CREATE, at least we see improvement. 25 and 20% for SMEs. The others kasi are in the 20 and 17%.
I was reading that in the newspaper today that
Yeah.
there is a $40 million investment by Lufthansa Technik, and they were one of the companies who were very nervous with
Yes.
the debates on the Trabajo Create bill because they were worried their capital investments would not be included in that. So obviously that was a good outcome. The fact that they invested $40 million or 2 billion pesos is a win for the Philippine. It's a big win for the Philippine economy. So congratulations. Is that a PESA or BOI?
Yes,
That's
PESA,
good.
Mr. Chair. But it's
PESA.
really a win. It showed yung confidence nung pumasa yung create at na-settle yung maraming issues, even the
A lot of investors were like that, no? They were
Even-
waiting for the outcome of
Yeah. Yes,
So-
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Even the VAT treatment also. So they
Yes,
watch closely.
Okay, now that the Create Bill has been enacted and I assume provides now some projection of stability in our tax regime, how do you predict? Is that the be all? Will that influence the FDIs coming to our shores, Mr. Lopez?
Mr. Chair, we're very optimistic. We're more optimistic than before. Mr. Chair, maraming na-address si Create on the corporate tax rate, the uncertainty in the discussion alone. Kahit hindi pa ginagalaw yung uncertainty, maraming nag-put on hold. Yung nagpo-put on hold, inabutan ng pandemic, so lalong hindi pumasok muna. But now that we are slowly recovering, actually the current issues now, Mr. Chair, is itong how we are dealing with the virus, the pandemic.
I have a question about one big investor, yung Rockwell Aerospace. What happened
Yes.
to that? Because they were holding off about $1 billion investment because of the Trabajo and Create bill. And the problem is, bumagsak na yung industriya nila. They're in the aerospace industry. So bumagsak yun in the meantime while they were waiting. So baka talagang di na natuloy. I'm wondering what happened to that, Secretary.
So actually recently we met them. They have a new country manager. They're still all in for Philippines. They know that the problem on aviation is temporary, similar to the Lufthansa technique issue. Because outside, I mean, other places in the world, they see travel, tourism slowly coming back, especially the highly vaccinated countries. So with that, it's very obvious kaya si Lufthansa proceeded with their project for MRO, itong mga sa maintenance. And we expect that to happen continuously, Mr. Chair. Hopefully, we have seen the worst because as we know, even the vaccination rollout is supposed to be hitting the high rate before December. I mean, before end of the year. Closer to 70 or if not hitting 70%. But the important thing on a personal note, Mr. Chairman, Your Honors, actually yung outside the vaccine, yung mga gamot, the molnupiravir is a one game changer that everyone is expecting that will really change the game. No? So it can add on to the vaccine immunity and cure. With that, I think the confidence level will start to really go back. And we are all concerned of COVID, of course, because
Which one is that, Secmon? Which one? Anong gamot yun, Secmon?
Yung molnupiravir by Merck.
That's like a treatment, no? A treatment drug for...
Yeah, capsule, Mr. Chair, capsule.
Yeah.
Capsule, Mr. Chair, capsule.
Is that taken by those who already have COVID or to prevent COVID?
From what I've been reading, both po eh. It can be taken before, I mean, kung di ba, yung just to protect, also
Right.
at the early stage.
Okay.
So it will really kill the virus instantly. So that's based on the material. 100% based on clinical test. We were watching...
Well, that's why, before we know it, dapat kaya nga tama si Senator Drilon na medyo may plano na tayo. Kasi pagka we don't know, we might open up quicker than we expect, you know. We might be thinking we'll be following this pace. Then suddenly you mentioned this miracle drug, then boom, suddenly the economy is open in a few months. Then what have we done for our industries? I hope we're ready to cope with any possible influx, etc.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chair. Kaya actually, even during pandemic, hindi tayo minto ng pag-promote, and we can do much more because of the virtual nature of roadshows. We were doing something like 17 roadshows in a year, all virtual. So maganda ho. Now we talk to US, the business community, the EU several times, the chamber, etc. So
How is the interaction with TESDA with respect to manpower and providing possible upskilling for some of these industries, and perhaps in anticipation of increased investment, because we have a very young population. There's a lot of potential that seen by investors. How are we doing in that respect?
Well, TESDA is really nakatutok ko talaga. In fact, inassign siya ni President Duterte to look into itong mga 4IR, which is the future, to prepare our workforce. Especially, in fact, number one sa kanila ay nawalan ng trabaho, ma-retrain, ma-retool, and also those out of school youth, lahat ng pwedeng i-train, especially nga on the digitalization aspect. Mr. Chair, kaya that's why they have a bigger budget than us. I'm not complaining, but they're really more for scholarship, which is what's needed by the economy. And we, I mean, with DTI, TESDA, DOLE, and other agencies, we have developed our Philippine Skills Future Framework. Ibig sabihin, really preparing the kind of workforce that's in demand by the industry sector, so that mula grade school pa lang, pine-prepare na yung mga subjects that they need, that will help up to the high school and the tertiary, whether VocTech or college. And then, of course, the STEM modules, Mr. Chair.
Sige, we'll just ask the TESDA during the budget na lang siguro. Senator Drilon, yes, Minority Leader.
Yes, I think it's a very interesting chart. We represent, for the last, this is an average for the last 10 years of FDIs, of inward flow of FDIs. We are 4.6%. We note that, Vietnam is already double our rate, Mr. Chairman. It's 9 as against our 4.6.
Samsung, we lost the Samsung sweepstakes,
Yes,
Your Honor.
there are big investment, Mr. Chair, that went to Vietnam for reasons cited earlier. They're like an extension of China, Mr. Chair. Locate in China, but they locate in Vietnam to, as you know, yung recent problem ng China-US trade war and all that, sometimes naglo-locate sa Vietnam because they can skip the trade war. And yet, it's beside China. It's very, I don't want to mention this, but actually, some are saying, mabilis mag-decide din kasi centralized government. But somehow, that's an advantage to a certain extent, no? But we're not advocating that. Ang claim naman natin, we're the most democratic country, no? But in all this, sometimes it has some benefit when it comes to, I think, decision making. The other thing, at least, ang isa kong what is working in our favor with the population is the market size that we have. Also, together with market size is the labor workforce, because we have 49 million. All the investors we talk to, they always cite Philippines. Walang problema sa talent. Ang daming talent. We are the go-to in terms of talent. Mid-skill, high-skilled, lahat po. So, and we talk English, etc. So, hardworking, highly trainable. So, ito po, actually, the reason why Samsung, for example, went to Vietnam, almost free daw ang land lease rate. So, there are other incentives given. If we can really, if we really want those high, high-level investors or investors of national significance, I think the good thing we create, it allows the president also to give extra incentive. So that's the reason why we also cite that. We talk to, there are other, if I may cite, we have this is just a short list. We have a list of all potential investors. And we are also talking of mga hyperscalers, the Google, Amazon, and all that. We are all in talks with them. But of course, we cannot claim yet that they're coming. But certainly we have approached key sectors. The Japanese wiring harness, they're all in the Philippines. They're expanding. Aside from the electronics companies, we are also, as seen in the charts, Japan's number 1 or 2 in our FDI. So a lot of trust already. The other thing, Mr. Chair, and this is where we need the Senate, they see the ratification of RCEP very important. RCEP is a Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Japan is there. ASEAN is there. You cannot
Just a
imagine.
simple question. Sorry to interrupt. Has the executive given it to the Senate?
Yes, Mr. Chair. About 2-3 weeks ago, Mr. Chair, we're
Okay.
happy to. So it's okay kasi we are in touch with the Office of Senator Coco Pimentel. It's a
Okay.
matter of scheduling lang na unahan tayong mga budget. But Mr. Chair, it's on the Senate. Hopefully, we can pass it before the end of the year because that will allow us to capitalize on the RCEP market.
When did we accede to the RCEP, the executive? When did we sign it?
We signed. Sorry, when or what?
Yeah, when did the executive sign it?
We can get the exact date. I think wala pa 1 month, Mr. Chair. Parang 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Okay.
We can give the exact date. Anyway, we know that the Senate will give due consideration. That will allow us a greater market to that, and also to September 2 pala, Mr. Chair. So
What is September 2? The date of executive accession, signing, or the date of transmittal to the Senate?
Signing.
Signing or signing to, Mr. Chair, signing.
Signing. Yeah, we you know, if you gave it to us earlier, we would have had more time to discuss it, Secretary,
Yeah.
no? Kasi we follow a very predictable schedule. Once we get into October, November, the budget takes over our plenary schedule. So that's something. If you need something passed in Congress, you have to work around it.
It's okay, Mr. Chair, and we trust the Senate anyway. And also, actually, nagkaroon na kami ng briefing sa committee, Mr. Chair, para at kahit hindi pa nara-ratify yon, nag-briefing na para ma-present na kaagad yung mga pros and cons. And it was reviewed also by the economists in the country, lahat ng mga stakeholders, on why it will be value-adding to our GDP, to our economy, and why it is beneficial to us. So we'll have another committee hearing on that, Mr. Chair. So anyway, just to drive home the point, Mr. Chair, that the investors actually, the FTAs like RCEP is a big come-on to investors because they know that they have easier market access. They have easier access also to imported inputs coming from the RCEP countries. And they can easily do everything here. There's predictability in trade, in investment rules. Doon kasi sa RCEP, yun yung very important yung mga rules-based mga trade and investment policies. Kaya the investors also value that, Mr. Chair. So just to mention that the FTAs, for example, a lot of investors locating us in the Philippines or locating in the Philippines, because of our, let's say, GSP with the US, they can enter. If they produce in another country in Asia, pinapatawan ng tariff plus minsan may anti-dumping duty pa. So maybe they will enter EU market at 50%. Pag sa Philippines nag-produce, when they enter the US, the EU market, zero duty. So just an example, many investors really came to us because of mga ganong reasons din. So isa rin po yan sa factor that it's important for us to proceed with all these FTA discussions. Aside from RCEP, we are pushing for talks like with South Korea that will increase our penetration of some more products. When we're talking of potential FTA, hopefully we can finalize that. Just for the information lang muna, Mr. Chair. Wala pa tayong approval ba?
Sana po, Mr. Secretary, huwag mo namang sabihin at the end of this year, hindi kasi in-approve ng Senado, hindi ratified ng Senado ang RCEP. But as the chairman is pointing out, you acceded to this convention when? Only in September. And you know, as our chairman said, we have our own schedule, and it's quite unfortunate that we are being pressed for time. This is a critical convention.
Bale, we'll work closely with the Senate, Mr. Chair.
Okay,
Ano lang ho, trabaho lang ho. Trabaho.
okay, sige.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
If
Senator
look-
Binay.
Looking at this chart, we are firmly number 6. I don't think, you know, ang danger na lang eh. Hindi na makakahabol si Cambodia. It's only 1.7% of the total. Si Laos, 0.7. Si Myanmar, 1.7. It's not that, it doesn't provide us any comfort. We are firmly at number 6. I don't think we can, you
4
know.
to 6 tayo, Minority Leader, or between 4 to 6, depending on the year.
Yeah, the next chart, Mr. Chair, as shown earlier,
Yeah.
at least we see improvement naman over the years.
Okay, sige.
Yeah. Pero malayo ang problema natin, Minority Leader, malayo
Malayo.
yung top 3. There is some distance to catch before we get to the medal stage.
Yes, before we reach the number 3, but at least we're number 4 now.
Sige.
Yeah. Anyway, just keep working, Kesek. Let's keep working.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Chair. Last few charts, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Senator Binay, sorry. Yeah, I acknowledge you earlier.
Question lang, hindi ba Secretary Lopez nagiging nasa wait and see mode yung mga investors because we are having an election next year? Hindi ba nagiging factor yon? Kasi di ba, next year it's a presidential election, so ibig sabihin nun, there's this probability na magkaroon din ng shift dun sa policy.
Mr. Chair, we're very happy to note, and we always highlight that the Philippines has been a long-time democratic country, and policies remain. We have always been market-based. We follow market-based principles. We're a member of WTO for so many years. There's stability in many of these policies, Mr. Chair, Madam Senator. So, yun ang assurance naman natin, regardless of the leadership, the president. They see the behavior. I mean, our adherence to FTAs, adherence to mga market-based principles, things like this. We don't intervene. We really allow private business to prosper, to operate with less intervention as much as possible. So,
But Senator Binay might be right,
natin.
Secretary, because if you look at 2015 to 2016, there is a big jump in 2016. So baka they waited for the dust to settle, so to speak. No, I'm just surmising. I don't know if that's really the case, but it's possible.
Yeah, yes, maybe to a certain extent, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Binay.
Okay, so the last
Go ahead.
set of
Go ahead,
charts
Sec.
before the way forward, the work program, is also the question to yung tinanong din po ng Senate, especially si Senator Drilon last time, which is on the unemployment. So when we talk of jobs, para ho mas maganda yung basehan natin ng jobs numbers, we simply base it na dun sa labor force survey. And this will tell us the movement in the unemployment and the underemployment rate. So we look at the lower line, which is the unemployment. So we are, prior to the pandemic, we have been averaging mga 5%. That's the usual level of unemployment prior to pandemic. May time na nag 4.5, but generally 5%. But the pandemic brought it up to 17%. That's the big spike. But the year or the quarters after, it somehow tapered down to 10, 8.7, 7.1, 8.7, 6.9. And actually, yung may latest dito a few days ago, 8.1. So bumabalik pa tayo sa 8.1, Mr. Chairman. Dapat 6.9 na. Nag-improve na sana, closer to the 5% pre-pandemic. It tells us that while we are recovering, yung mga good news, may bad news pa din. So it tells us na hindi lahat nag-grow, and therefore, we just have to continue. Ang malaking impact dito sa unemployment, Mr. Chair, is, again, as mentioned kanina, our recovery program. In other words, yung the way, let's say, yung mga restrictive, not restrictive, let's say lockdowns or the way we provide restrictions sa economy, yung movement, mobility, if we do more lockdowns. That's why the IATF has really moved towards a direction right now, if you will notice. Even at high alert level, we are allowing sectors to reopen. And the move now is to consider much more predictability so that the remaining sectors will continue to open regardless of alert level. Ang papalitan na lang yung operating capacity. For example, at high cases, allowed pero 10% or 20% lang operating capacity. Things like this will at least allow the return to jobs because the jobs will bring the income. The income will create the demand will create more investment. So yun po yung flow of reason why we have to reopen the economy, and we can revive the economy even without big stimulus package by just allowing reopening, allowing jobs to return. And also later on by also buying local. No? So creating more jobs, more manufacturing. So again, that is the overall tenet. Anyway, this is the broad picture. We'll now move to the last chart on the numbers. To the, sorry, maikli ulit. No, ay, maliit. But ito lang red. It's supposed to contain red fonts, Mr. Chair, just to show, or the negative, the last column, kahit ito na lang po ang tingnan natin, yung dalawang nakabilog. From 2020 to 2021, the left circle tells us na nag-improve, may positive 365. Ito po, employment headcount in thousands. Sabihin, nag-create ng more jobs by 365,000. Pero if you compare to pre-pandemic, we're still below, minus 854,000. So if you want now to analyze, alin-alin yung bagsak pa rin versus pre-pandemic, marami po. Yan mo yung lahat ng negative on the last column. So kung isa-isahin, agriculture sa terms of jobs, agriculture, fishery, even in manufacturing, meron pa rin 163,000. Sa services total, we can see the hotels, again, accommodation, and food service, the restaurants, information information is positive. The other services activities, the other services, the SMEs that I mentioned earlier. The arts, entertainment, recreation, Mr. Chair, we all know, hindi pa ho sila nakakabalik because of the fear of the Delta. Yung mga entertainment, events, sarado pa eh. So, ito ho yung ngayon ho pinag-uusapan sa IETF. All these small SME activities, these are now being considered yung tinatawag na 3 Cs, yung high risk sana. 3 Cs, close room, close contact, yung magkakatikit ng tao, o kaya crowded. Ito ho yung pinag-aaralan ngayon na if these activities na natitirang sarado ay mabuksan natin pero kahit maliit ng operating capacity, marami ring makabalik sa trabaho. So we're moving in that kind of mindset because we are saying that the virus is here to stay. We have to manage it. And I hope you're seeing
it's like what we said about the restaurants, di ba, Sek?
We're seeing the end of Delta, hopefully.
Yung sa restaurants, buksan natin, especially if they're vaccinated, then allow a bigger capacity. Remember in the last hearing, we mentioned that.
Correct,
Mr. Chairman.
So at least po, dito sa 3 Cs, nakaumpisa na tayong mag-liberalize, mag-open.
Yeah, center
Hindi na tayo ng high volume, high labor.
Mr. Chairman, nagtataka lang ako, bakit yung fishing and aquaculture, kasama siya dun sa naapektuhan ng employment? When, number one, wala namang swine fever, diba? I would understand yung agriculture and forestry, but yung fishing, what caused the decline?
Actually ho, maganda hong tanong
ba yan?
yun.
Dahil ba sa West Philippine Sea issue natin na hindi nakapunta yung mga mangingisda natin doon?
Hindi po. Dahil po sa apektado po lahat kunwari sarado ang restaurant, walang bumibili ng mga pagkain, mga pag-iisda, yung mga dating nagsusupply. Somehow the demand has been dampened, and this caused a lot of pagbaba ng maraming output, pati magbabawas ng tao. So, yun po. Actually,
Walang kumakain ng sashimi.
yeah, Mr. Chair. So, to a certain extent, may konting growth siya versus 2020. Dun po sa example na yon, pero it's far from the pre-pandemic. So, kailangan ho talaga magtuloy-tuloy itong reopening natin as the way forward so that we can recover from the jobs point of view, because it shows us really a lot of sectors affected, Mr. Chair. Still a lot of sectors affected.
Yes.
Sec,
Again,
go ahead, Senator John. Go ahead.
as pointed out in the other charts by our chairman, what is significant here is the 2019 versus 2021. Looking at 2020 and 2021 to me is misleading because you have a very low base in 2020. So the more to me the significant data is 2019 pre-pandemic and 2021 present. And if you look at this, there is this 854,000? What is this, Mr. Secretary? Representing July of 2021. What is 854,000? 854,000 jobs lost?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So if you just look at the July figure, that's the total. Jobs, employment lost or jobs lost.
Wow.
854,000.
This is huge.
Yes.
It's huge.
Yeah,
Very
Mr.
big.
That's why we really wanted more reopenings so that the demand side will work and the supply side can follow. So everything will follow.
What is happening in the IATF? Obviously, this is the result of the lockdowns, etc. Very clear. I'm no economist, I am no health expert, but from the way we have been handling the pandemic, the solution is the lockdown instead of it being only a temporizing solution to be able to adopt more substantial or reasonable solutions. Ito, 854,000 jobs lost between 2019 and 2021. This is very, very alarming, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah. I would agree, Mr. Chair, Your Honor. Pero actually hindi naman po IATF ang may cause nito, kundi yung Delta variant. Yung virus ang ba't nawala? Ayan, hello?
We still hear you, Sec.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Okay.
We can hear you, Sec.
Okay. So yun po, it's the Delta variant. But as we go through this, Mr. Chair, we started to really tweak or adjust the kind of lockdown we have. That's why we moved to this new system of just doing more yung granular lockdown, yung small pockets na lang, rather than a wider area. And in fact, as mentioned, we are now studying even reopening the other parts na sarado pa, na other small businesses to allow, again, more economic activities, taking note of this observation, Mr. Chair. So, doon na po tayo papunta. We're seeking, this is the topic of discussion now this week and next week, Mr. Chair.
I want to follow up on the questions asked by my colleagues. Is this your last chart of your presentation?
On the numbers po. Then, mabilis na yung susunod. It's more of yung mga plano and program.
Yeah, but I'd like to take off. I think this is the right moment to ask it. What is the geographical spread of these lost jobs and the lost industry, lost demand maybe, or lost basically the poor economic performance? Obviously, if you look at an area, a province, if it's tourism based, like my home province, Aurora, it really lost a lot of jobs. So I'm trying to see if there is anything on your end. I want to see what is the figure for the country. What are the figures for the country in terms of
geographical.
In terms of the production?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, para sure yung number, we'll get the geographical, but offhand po, we know that one half is Metro Manila, almost one half, 40% is Metro Manila, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
So, except for the agriculture part here, you can count the one half mostly Metro Manila and urban cities, Mr. Chair.
Give us a regional,
Calabarzon. Yeah. We will
Tapos,
get that.
that's a pandemic-based question, no? That's a pandemic-based question. But I have a non-pandemic-based question, which is relates to our productive capacity. Where are those the export industries? I suspect they're in the PEZA zones. So they are in NCR, Greater Manila, Calabarzon, a lot in Cebu, and maybe a smattering here and there of our eco zones in Mindanao, no? Just a few. But I'd like you to map that out for us because obviously that's where the growth will come from, no? And I think as policymakers, it's incumbent upon us to ensure that the development and the productive capacity is spread out very well or equitably across the regions, Secretary. That's what I'm driving at, no?
Yeah.
Because NEDA, in its past economic reports, every time it releases, it always says that there are spatial aspects to poverty. Spatial, meaning poverty exists in certain areas. And if we as policymakers don't do anything to address that, then they may be left behind. These areas may be left behind. So we were conscious that we need to ramp up productive capacities and do everything in terms of infrastructure, in terms of providing public goods for those areas that don't have the eco zones, diba? Otherwise, it becomes a chicken and egg problem, diba? Only the rich will get richer, diba? Everyone will flock to, diba? We need to put ports where they're needed, where we need to put factories where they're needed. Yun ang point ko, Mr. Secretary. So I hope the DTI can help us in mapping the productive capacities of our country. Kasi if only a few areas or a few regions are productive, that means you have dormant productive capacities. That means you have dormant talents in that area. No? So that's something we need to look at, Mr. Secretary.
Copy, tama po, Mr. Chair, we'll do that.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead with any presentation you might have.
On a related note, Mr. Chair, actually, isa rin sa maganda sa CREATE is it removes it basically makes the same incentive for all wherever you are. You don't have to be in an eco zone. I think this gives more flexibility to investors as long as their activity is in the SIPP. They can locate anywhere, even in the poorest part of the country, and even get more years of incentives because they're located in those areas. So that's the beauty of...
The problem there, Sec, is wala yung one-stop shop nature ng PEPSA. That's what really attracts them to those areas. It's the one-stop because they're not subjected to the vagaries of various real property taxes. Yung capital equipment ba nila, real property tax ba? They're not subjected to those questions because in a PESA zone, it's predictable. They know what the interpretation is going to be.
Okay, tama po. Kaya po, importante ho yung LGU ka-partner dito and would have the same mindset in attracting investments.
Yeah, my point is we cannot leave it to the market to select the champions, Secretary, because there will be losers. And it's up to us policymakers to take care of those, to make sure there are no losers in this system, di ba?
Okay. Last three charts, Mr. Chair. Just on the Philippine recovery and build back better. This is also a lot, but essentially we cover all the way forward. The first column is on intensification, implementation of the vaccination. As mentioned earlier, it will do a lot in terms of reopening, mobility, etc. So hindi ko na po isa-isahan. You know this very well. Talks about the rollout and the PDITR strategies. Maybe I'll focus on the second column, which is more of the arrangement in the business sector, the private sector, to adjust and recover. First is allow telecommuting arrangements, encourage digitalization. This has been a business model that's worked very well during the pandemic. For example, ito ho yung mga work from home or alternative work arrangement. And this is the reason why the IT BPM sector continued to grow from 2% looking at 5% growth and continue to hire. Kaya po buti na rin in our FIRB, we also recently come out with a rule that the work from home scheme will be allowed up to 90%. In other words, we do not want to disrupt what is working very well for our sectors. So we want this to continue even after March, which is the initially set date for the end of the work from home. Because we believe in the future, talking to the industry sector, the hybrid model is really the way to go in terms of productivity and cost. So yun po, magkakaroon ng virtual, magkakaroon ng physical location. The regulatory burdens, yung EODB is very important, so we continue to work on the ease of doing business. For example, right now, if we look at yung number of days to process starting a business, we managed to reduce already the over 30 days to less than 10 days, about 5 to 7. And recently, for regular corporations, the SEC is now able to do it within 1 day. On the DTI side, kami po, we have been doing this for 8 minutes, business name registration. So ganun po, kasi online na online application, online payment, in 8 minutes, you are registered in your business name. So a lot of improvement po dito and online automation. Hopefully, ito nga ho, yung mga continuously wino-work up, mga regulatory relief. The Rebuild is our program on how we can prepare, be ready for the 4IR, the innovations. We can have more discussions on that later. I will call our USEF if you want, Mr. Chair. The improving the business climate, it's connected to the rightmost chart. Ito na po yung mga ginork out ng Senate and Congress on CREATE, PSA, RTL, retail freight, and all that. Of course, the last point in the second column is the very important MSME support. So dito po where our budget is really needed is on financing MSME, because our utilization of the Bayanihan 2 has been used up more than 100%, Mr. Chair. Kaya siya more than 100%. Umanap na kami ng ibang pondo para lang madagdag doon sa pondo ng SP Corp for MSMEs. Equipment, shared service facilities, it's like kumbaga, kung sa agriculture, mga farmers, mga traktora, sa mga SME, ito yung mga makina. So this is also an important shared equipment para ho maraming makinabang. And of course, the assistance on access to market. On the third column, this is what we just talked about on how we can tweak our protocols on reopening the economy safely and assuring minimum public health standard. And then the last is, as mentioned, all the economic reforms. The next chart, just moving quickly.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Sen. Nancy.
pwede bumalik lang tayo doon sa kabilang, to the previous chart.
Previous slide, yeah.
Yeah. Kaso lang, Secretary, I think I support yung gradual reopening of the economy. Kaso lang, wala dito dun sa program nyo yung testing part ng protocols for COVID. Hindi ba for as long as we're not testing enough, hindi natin nakaka-capture eh. Kaya I think kung wala yung testing, tracing, how do we open the economy? So baka that is something that that government and private sector can work together. Na nakita naman natin na nakasucceed with the vaccination program.
Mm-hmm. Tama po, Madam Senator.
Si SEC, no? Si yung smaller, especially pag walang public support, if we leave it to the market, only the big companies can afford the testing. The smaller ones, the smaller entrepreneurs cannot.
Yeah. I would agree, Mr. Chair. So, kahit nakasulat yan sa pinaka-left column sa ilalim, yung PDITR, actually it's part of our strategy, prevention, detect, basically, and then to isolate, to treat, and to reintegrate. Nandyan po yung testing, but these are all really more of the government initiated, pati yung mga private labs na medyo mahal. So, now what we are seeing in other countries, this is where we should be headed. As we reopen, we should have more testing, antigen facility testing. Kasi anyone, like in other countries, we've been reading up on this na there's more reopening, and it's up to the citizen to really conduct their own twice a week test on their own antigen. And it's up to them if they're tested positive, wag na lumabas. But I know it has some implementation challenges here. So, but that is the way forward. To your point, that's very important. Yung magkaroon talaga ng, kung hindi man PCR test, kahit yung antigen test na ipinamimigay. In other countries kasi, pinamimigay yung antigen test. And they do their test twice a week. And do not go out if you're positive there and have another PCR test. So at least that is hopefully maybe on the not our budget but the others DOH budget, more testing, antigen testing kits to be given out to the population.
And siguro, Secretary, baka maganda din na meron tayong incentive dun sa mga workers, baka joint with government and the owners, for them to be encouraged to report na may nararamdaman na silang symptoms. Kasi marami din ako naririnig na kahit masama na yung pakiramdam nila, tinatago nila because they can't afford not to work for 1 month, di ba? Di ba kahit ano lang yun, sore throat lang, but they're already spreading the virus. So, I think isa yun dun sa nagiging cause nung surge natin kasi nga tinatago dahil yung fear of not going to work. So baka, ewan ko kung anong pwedeng program na they'll still be assured na may kakainin sila kahit wala silang trabaho.
Totally agree po, Madam Senator, Mr. Chair. Kasi, in fact, kasama to sa discussion din sa ITF on how can we have paid isolation leaves. This is where, I guess, for now, government should budget para ma-encourage mag-isolate yung alam nilang positive sila. Kasi otherwise, sabihin nila, kailangan ko magtrabaho. Hindi ako pwedeng mag-absent, kailangan ko magtrabaho at the risk of course, spreading it. So, pero kung paid sila, they will really follow and they will isolate. And so, it's important magkaroon ng budget dito. Kasi kung wala akong budget, papasok at papasok. Now, what can be done, of course, this is beyond me, but if government cannot budget, maybe to work it out with the private sector, hate or subsidize or whatever. This is maybe something to be discussed pa, Mr. Chair. But that's very important.
Chairman.
Yes, go ahead if you have remaining
slides. Ito na po. Essentially, the next chart will just show us the industries that we are trying to push for in answer to the many questions earlier on. Ano yung next move natin? Ano yung po-promote? Our as DTI, unfortunately, our only ammunition would be the incentives. Beyond that, if I may say, in other countries, they have more ammunition. They really give support to companies, for example, in buying high-tech machines, IoT machines, buying machines for the creative people to use, buying labs, etc. A government has a big role, budget, if we want to push towards more innovation. DTI does not have that budget. So, but nevertheless, we're lining up industries that we want to push for. At least yung mga nandito, that this is the list that initially we would be supporting under CREATE, that's the SIPP, the Strategic Investment Priorities Plan. We categorize it
free training of workers, Secretary. Can you not offer that?
Opo, kasama po yung training, another dimension po, Mr. Chair. But we focus on the 5 key ones. Because of the pandemic, it has taught us that of course, there is the provision of basic necessities. In this case, aside from the food, the agri, the next column is industry, the healthcare products. So this has been identified already as areas where we should push for more investments, incentives, etc. And on the right, the services part, telecom, public transport, online education, health service, online telemedicine, construction of housing. special economic zones. Then the second group would be the support for the IR. And these are normally in the industry column, electrical, electronics, mga innovation and R&D, mga shared labs, fabrication lab that we have. If we can support more of those, it will increase productivity ng ating mga SMEs. Again, R&D should not be limited to the big companies. It should be democratized. It's the equalizer po. Kaya kailangan SMEs should have access to all this mga fabrication labs and R&D. That's why we have a program na mabanggit ko na rin, yung mga regional inclusive innovation centers, wherein we really tap MSMEs and tap the academe and really work out support to these sectors. Number 3, address supply chain gaps. This is one way to address the perennial problem on imports. If we want to have a better balance of trade, aside from promoting domestic capacity for export, if we promote domestic capacity, it will also prevent imports. I mean, naturally, rather than preventing it as a policy and yet you don't have a capacity. What are these? These are the basic industries, the tool and die, the iron and steel. And the good thing po, this is all about attracting investments in these areas. Good news, last year, the other year, meron na tayong mga naimbita na iron and steel companies in Mindanao. There's the biggest in China, hopefully coming also, if not this year, next year. The biggest po ito, even, I guess, in the world.
That's yung CDO, no? Si CDO ba yan? May FIVIDEC ba yan, Secmon?
Ano daw? Yeah.
Is that the one in CDO or near FIVIDEC?
FIVIDEC ang isang tinitingnan po na location, but they're open also to the Leyte area or the Leyte.
Right.
But sa ngayon po, open pa sa ngayon doon, open pa. But the other, yung nauna, nasa Gensan na po siya, building the factory, immediately they will be on phase 2. So, ibig sabihin, sunod-sunod yung investment niya. Because they know the future in the Philippines is high consumption. Babalik yan after pandemic and they're building on that. And wala kasi supply gap po ito. Wala tayong basic iron and steel. So, their phase 2 will be hopefully in FIVIDEC, Sir Chair. So, that's the same company, the one in Gensan. Pwede naman sabihin pangalan kasi nandito na sila. That's Panwa Group. So they're already here. So concrete po ito. And there are other companies coming. Of course, we're pushing for more chemicals, more cement. We just recently approved under CREATE the cement expansion and new investments, again, to build domestic capacity. Now, on modern Philippines, talks about urban farming, cold chain, agri-technology, other processing like mechanically deboned meat, etc. po. So, hindi ko na ho isa-isahin to save time. Then, the last part, last chart, to the question of Senator Dillon also on yung future, ano yung mga emerging, growing technologies, industries. So, ito po, in-outline na po natin dito, ano yung technology, ano yung growth opportunity, and the strategies we should support. And the strategies we already developed, like AI, National AI Strategy Roadmap. And we are building our own center without government budget because we decided to make it private, parang non-foundation, and we've talked to conglomerates who are very, very supportive of that, so we can build a center for AI. What AI does is really improve productivity. Pero ang maganda dito, again, it's not limited to the big companies. We will make this available to SMEs. They're like the AI consultants that will do service to the SMEs to level up, help them in production, deciding where to put up the next branch or the next plant. Yung mga ganon, such as those. If they have huge data to process, it can be processed in minutes if they use AI. Augmented reality, virtual reality, so you know all these things, the Internet of Things. These are growth areas that we are promoting, Your Honors. Cloud service, hyperscalers. Recently, we launched our hyperscaler promotion strategy, so yung mga Google, Alibaba, and all that, the users would normally require data centers, and we're promoting Philippines as the next data center hub for hyperscalers. Only because also that nasa saturate na yung ibang countries. So we're capitalizing on that. Like their number one provider here in this region is Singapore. So we're saying next to Singapore, Philippines has, more areas for this. We are promoting this. We will support you, etc. So
That's power dependent, di ba, Secmon?
and renewable energy po. That's the one required here.
Very strong, you need a lot of power supply for that. Tama ba?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Tama po. And also, ang requirement ng clients nila, renewable energy. So it will build on our renewable energy.
Well, my worry is the power supply in the next few years, actually. I'm filing a resolution to to inquire into the power supply for the next few years, Secretary. I hope you can also look into it and talk to the players or your counterparts in the energy department, because that will all be for naught if we cannot expand our our energy capacities, Mr. Secretary.
Tama, Mr. Chair. I am with you there. I will support because yun hong actually sinasabi ng mga power producers, not only on renewable. We to a certain extent they're saying there's still a need for the base load because right now I think they're worried na baka pati base load magkaroon ng
That's even worse. That's even worse, Secretary.
Yeah.
Because just a few years ago, we already had the surplus or a glut, and now we have an impending shortage, which is very sad.
Mr. Chair. For a growing economy, we really need to prepare in advance dun sa power. So, the others po, animation, electric, autonomous vehicle, it sounds far, but frankly, we are already talking to players here. Actually, meron na ho tayong limited extent, some producers, but the unknown brand, ang mga electric vehicles. Pero ang gusto natin, the bigger automotive electric vehicles. But the important thing, the parts are already coming from us because we're number one in electronics. So it's an industry we can easily get into.
Mr. Chairman? Sorry, Secretary.
Nancy,
just to share dun sa issue on power, because I've been attending the hearings ng Committee on Energy. And in fact, sinasabi ho nila, Mr. Chairman, blessing in disguise yung COVID dun sa supply natin sa power. Kasi kung hindi na nagka-COVID, for sure,
Shortage
talaga
kaagad.
may shortage na tayo.
Mas maaga.
Yes.
What is the explanation, Sen. Nancy? Bakit daw pinabayaan ng ganon? Why did they, when we had, just a few years ago, we already had a glut. So how did they let it reach this point?
Well, number one, kasi nga andun pa rin yung problem dun sa permits. Kaya ang tagal. Meron pa din ho. And then, during the hearing, nagtuturoan yung, kasi yung sa
DOE and
NGCP, yung sa NGCP, hindi pa daw kinoconnect. So yung excess energy in the other island, hindi magamit ng kabilang island. So isa yun dun sa mga reasons. And then, plus nga, aging na din yung mga power plants natin. And so far, walang pumapasok na bago.
Yes.
Well, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. Otherwise, all of these nice plans of Secretary Lopez, especially yung cloud services, you need a lot of power for that because that's streaming. You're going to store your storage in the cloud. So you need to perform all of these services, you need a lot of power.
Yes. These, very important. Now we're still debating on the sufficiency of power. 5 years ago, we should have seen this. But instead of developing the power sector, we developed the politics and the political parties by, so.
Are you referring to anyone in particular?
Mr. Chairman, have we heard already the budget of the DOE? Not yet.
Wala pa po ata. That's under Senator Gatchalian,
yes.
Minority Leader. No, I'll check with the Secretary.
Because I agree with you. All these plans of the Department of Trade and Industry would just remain plans unless you have sufficient support in the energy sector. And
because one of the first questions any prospective large investor will ask what is the power situation like? And then they see it.
And then sige, just to share dun ho sa problema with yung kasi di ba alam naman ho natin yung Malampaya,
Wala na.
pawala na din siya. So like ngayon ho, naka-shutdown si Malampaya. So yung mga power plants natin, they're using yung alternative which is much more expensive than yung nakukuha nila sa Malampaya. So may impending din na increase in power cost.
Okay.
Tama ho.
Thank you for sharing, Senator Nancy, your experience sa Energy Committee. Go ahead, Sec Mon.
Okay po. That's the other industry po would be the digital health, robotics, and drones. They're very much already here. So we are promoting a lot of mga prospects dito. The sustainability, yung disaster, clean resilience, and climate change technology, education technology, devices and software, video entertainment technology, and agri technology. So all are eligible under SIPP in the CREATE. So we look forward to having more investments in these fields. That ends my presentation, Mr. Chair, Your Honors.
Thank you very much, Secretary Lopez. This is much improved from the last hearing. I'm sure even Minority Leader Drilon would admit that you have done your homework. But I'll ask him if he has any more questions, as well as Senator Binay. Minority Leader.
Well, firstly, let me express my appreciation to the good secretary for this presentation, and at least we have a macro perspective of what of the short term in terms of our investment climate. So from that macro perspective, I would like to ask a few questions on a micro level. Firstly, Mr. Chairman, you and I fought hard for funding the Small Business Corporation under Bayanihan.
Babaan niyo ng konti, magbabasa.
Our friends in the House did not want it here. They wanted to convert this into a infrastructure program, building toilets in the beach areas and other spots. But we fought hard to fund the Small Business Corporation, and we succeeded in putting up an 8 billion 80 million funding through equity infusion in SB Corp. This is important for our MSMEs. So may we know from the good secretary, where are we in terms of the loan program for under this Bayanihan 2 thing of 8 billion? Because I noticed, Mr. Chairman, that for 2022, there is a 1.5 billion subsidy for SB Corp operating budget, 1.5 billion. So it is only logical that we want to know what happened. How was 8 billion utilized in SB by the SB Corp?
Resource persons to turn off their mics, please. Mute if they're not speaking, except so we can listen to the Minority Leader. Can we ask the other resource persons to mute their mics, please?
Yeah, that's the question. May we have an update on the utilization of the 8 billion that we place as equity in SB Corp?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor. We're very happy to report, Mr. Chair, that we're very successful sa disbursement ng una muna ito yung sa CARES program. Salamat po sa 8 billion. As you know, base sa discussion sa Senate, 4 billion is allotted to the micro SME in general and another 4 million for the tourism and micro SMEs pa din. They're all administered by SB Corp.
Yes.
The good news po is that on the MSME part, yung in general, hindi tourism, we have used up over 100% na po. Kaya siya over 100%, ibig sabihin, we made use of additional funds from the SB Corp existing funds para lang hindi mahinto yung program, because we know that this is a program needed during the pandemic, and that we have to entertain maraming nag-a-apply dito. We're able to, mabilis yung processing, we made it online. We're able to process about 600 million a month. Kaya po, as we speak, we are now into a bit of background po. The 4 billion, bago ho nag-umpisa itong CARES, yung Bayanihan 2 na 4 billion, may inumpisahan na ho kami diyang 1 billion galing din sa SP Corp para lang sagot sa pandemic while waiting for the Bayanihan 2. So, ang base po natin 5 billion. So, yun po ang base. Ngayon po, ang napautang na po approved 5.7 billion.
Okay.
Ibig sabihin, used up na and ginamit na yung existing fund. 235,392. This is as of October 6. So very recent po. 5.7 billion approved to 35,392. Yung pong nakikita natin sa budget na ito po yung CARES under Bayanihan 2. Yung pong nakikita sa budget
the tourism allotments?
Okay. Sorry po. The part of that pala is the tourism, but it's very small. It's only 736.5 million to 606 borrowers.
Hindi po, yung 4 billion po na sinasabi ni Senator Frank na gustong dalhin sa CR ng ibang mambabatas. Would you know saan napunta, if it's been fully utilized, Secmon?
Ito po yung sa tourism, sa SB Corp pa rin to, yung pondo, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So we are awaiting for the reopening of course the economy, then the tourism. Siguradong it will follow na. Just a matter of time, and we're very fortunate that in a way, in coordination with Secretary Berna Puyat.
No, just the money. We just want a simple answer, Secmon. Of the 4 billion earmarked for tourism stakeholders under the SB Corp, magkano na pong nagastos? We're clear about yours. You went over. Of the 4, you've gone 5.7 because you added 1.7 of your own funds. But what about the DOT? Can we get the numbers, please?
736 million, Mr. Chair, the one that I mentioned.
Out of 4 billion, yun palang na disperse?
Yes, Mr.
Bakit
Chair.
ganun? Bakit po ganun?
Approved to 606. Relatively fewer takers than the regular program. Because many
You
of
mean to say there is 3 billion available but not being availed of? Is that what you're trying to tell us, Secon?
Correct po. But we expect this to be availed of. Pag nag-reopen, yun lang ho ang iniintay eh. Because yung tourism sector, ayaw manghiram kung sarado sila. Wala silang source ng revenue ng pambayad. So, iniintay nila yung full reopening so that malakas loob nilang may pambayad sila. That's the basic issue po dito. So, to us, the money is here. We are ready to lend it. I mean, SB Corp's ready to lend it. We're just waiting for and we're promoting this, Mr. Chair. In terms of yung mga requirements, we made it more attractive than the regular loan program. In other words, mas mataas yung lending amount, mas matagal ang grace period, yung mga ganong perks para lang humiram na sila.
I find it surprising that no one is availed. Baka hindi nila alam, Secretary, because there are some who need funds right now.
Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
Nancy?
Well, kasi I also attended the budget hearing of DOT.
Our chair for tourism, by the way.
Yeah, so nagiging problema, Chairman, yung dun sa industry, parang at this point, they cannot afford to take a loan. Kasi di ba, alam natin during the past year, closed open tong industry eh. Ang talagang gusto nila is, kung pwede, direct ayuda. Kumbaga, wala nang hindi utang kasi nga because of the uncertainty of the industry.
Yeah, tama po. But kami ho, as we talk about reopening and allowing more travel, domestic tourism, we are certain that this will just happen sooner, hopefully sooner than later. So, kasabot kami naka-ready dyan.
Pero, Secretary, di ba, if you base it dun sa in other countries, talagang yung kumbaga doon sa hierarchy ng makakabangon, mukhang nasa dulo pa tong tourism industry. Kaya I am sure parang at this point, it's too risky for them to take out a loan.
Tama po. That's the basic reason. So it will really just happen once the reopening starts on a continuing basis. Hindi rin ho pwede yung open-close, open-close. It has to be, pag nakikita na nilang tuloy-tuloy na to. And that will happen, of course, with the vaccination and the new medicines developed. So yun po yung sa CARES under Bayanihan 2. Now, the 1.5 billion po na part of budget actually goes to the other program, the original program, which is called P3, Pondo sa Pagbabago Pag-Asenso. This is 1.5 billion almost every year. Mga 3 taon na yan, 4 na taon. Yung unang taon yan, 1 billion muna, and then another year, 1.5. So yung pondo po yan na minamanage ng SB Corp is ito yung tinatawag na panlaban sa 5-6. This accumulated already to about 5.74 billion as we speak. Pero yung pautang dito, release is 9.35 billion. Mas malaki, a lot bigger. Bakit po? Kasi nakabayad na. Pinautang ulit. Nakabayad na, pinautang ulit. So umiikot na ho ito. This is more than paid up and returned to the implementing. Ang nag-implement po nito, hindi lang SB Corp. Retail po yan sa microfinance institutions. Kaya ho may payment, may certainty tayo ng payment.
So, Mr. Secretary, what is the total equity now of SB Corp? Because these are all equity contributions on the part of the national government, and then you lend this out interest-free, if I get you correctly, and there is just a service fee of, I don't know what, is it 8%, one-time service fee? So you build the equity for SB Corp. Is that a correct statement?
Yung pong the one on Bayanihan 2 is equity, the 8 billion. Pero itong 1.5 is MOOE. This is the fund. So pinapahiram. Ginagamit sa programa, Mr. Chair, Your Honor.
Okay. So the Bayanihan 2 is equity, but the budget for 1.5 for 2022 is, yes, it's an operating budget, corporate operating budget.
Correct, Your Honor.
It's a subsidy.
Correct, Your Honor.
So why is there no availments on the tourism side? Baka hindi po nila alam, hindi alam itong mga taga-Boracay, daming nahihirapan. Baka po.
Natatakot po, as explained po, it's the same promotional program that we do, hindi lang kami, even the OT, but it's really the general sentiment of uncertainty, especially for the sector. We believe just in the meantime, I guess in the short term.
Okay.
Once we reopen, all of this will start coming in, all the applications.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last point, last subject, Mr. Chairman, if you will permit. Again, on the micro aspect of DTI's mandate. I'm talking about the Blue Ribbon investigation because DTI is mentioned there. And this is in relation to the EMS components assembly. We at the outset we commend the DTI for its efforts, its initiatives, including the specific effort to repurpose manufacturing, and therefore to focus and bring the Filipino manufacturers to supply the surgical masks. And one of the companies which answered the call of DTI is EMS Components Assembly. The Secretary recalls this. You are aware of the EMS Components Assembly?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Your Honor. They're a very close partner in electronics, Mr. Chair. They're big in electronics.
Yes. In fact, they offered the lowest quotation for surgical masks of 13 pesos and 50 centavos 1 week after Pharmaly sold to the government 22 pesos as face mask. That is why we commend the effort of the DTI to repurpose the manufacturing, as it is called, what? Repurposing manufacturing, so that we can avail of this. But unfortunately, EMS failed because while initially the PSDBM awarded 1.3 billion contract to provide 100,000 medical grade face masks for 1350 a piece. They were able only to sell 25 million at 1350, and the rest inipit na inipit, hindi binili. In the meantime, we were importing from all over China until this Filipino corporation, Filipino outfit, a very reputable outfit, lost their pants because for the next 7 million of face masks, binaba po ng PSDBM ang presyo to 235. Can you imagine from 13 pesos, which is already one half of what was being purchased from Pharmaly? They refused, PSDBM refused to take further orders after 25.8 million masks delivered. The rest, 74 million, was only sold for 235. Nalugi po itong EMS, which followed your advice, Mr. Secretary. Why did this happen?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Your Honors. Tama ho yun. We talked to a lot of former garments or steel garments companies and mga electronics as the major exporters habang humina yung export nila. And para mag-repurpose, because again, following our drive to increase domestic capacity, dahil wala tayong supply niyan, we wanted to have our own production and not rely on imports. And they did, marami hong sumama sa programa natin, the repurposing program. Ngayon po, after naman naka-develop sila, kami naman po, we all just introduced them to DOH and of course to PSDBM. Hindi na ho kami part kasi we're not privy already to the discussion. In fact, ang iba hong in-introduce din namin sila even to mga local hospitals, basta may market sila. Of course, ang task kasi namin to encourage them to produce. And sa trying to recall, yung kanilang operation, I think they started sometime end of May or June, which at the time, if again trying to recall, medyo doon dumadami na rin yung supply. Kasi I remember during the time of start ng pandemic, so in February pa, even before March, February pa, hanapan talaga ng mask buong mundo eh. I mean, wala tayong makuha na local manufacturer, even trying to source from other countries through our trade attachés. So, unfortunately, yung ibang country nga ayaw magbenta, kailangan din daw nila. So, nagkahirapan. Kasi presyo ho talaga. But I think we had that problem February, March, April, and May. Pero I think towards end of May, nagkakaroon na ng paghupa, dumami na nagkaroon na ng somehow ng supply, either from China, kasi I think at certain months, yung China lumuwag na in terms of marami na gumaling. So, nag-export na rin ng mask, yung ibang country din. So, medyo nag-stabilize ng konti, although mataas pa rin ang presyo ng mask noon. But not as high po nung March, April, May. So,
Mr. Chairman, with the permission of our Minority Floor Leader, Sen Frank, hindi lang po EMS yung nalugi. In fact, maraming nag-repurpose na hanggang ngayon nakatambak pa din yung PPE nila sa mga bodega nila. Kasi nga, nag-repurpose sila tapos hindi binili ng
Yes.
BBMPS sa kanila yung supply.
And worst, excuse me, Mr. Secretary, worst, preference was given to foreign manufacturers, particularly those from China. It may interest our chairman to know that after formally at 10 billion as purchase orders, the next highest is a company called Element Trading Limited, incorporated in Hong Kong 6 months before the delivery of the, and you know how much they got? 6.9 billion worth of contracts for face masks. And then you have Zhuzhou Construction Machinery Group of China, construction company, got 2.2 billion. And then the Merxis of Singapore got 1.3 billion. This is where I am disappointed, Mr. Secretary, because the Filipino manufacturers were not given priorities. And nalugi nga, they were encouraged by your encouragement to repurpose their manufacturing. They shifted to face mask from electronics like EMS electronics, only to be being now holding millions of face masks dahil napuno na yung merkado sa supply galing sa China. You know, this is deplorable, Mr. Secretary. And I hope you can tell me that you protected our manufacturers because under the Bayanihan 2, it's clear that very clearly it states that the government shall give preference and procure products, materials, and supplies produced, made, and manufactured in the Philippines, and to award to the lowest domestic manufacturer bidder, notwithstanding that its bid is 15% in excess of the lowest foreign bid. And so really it was designed to encourage our manufacturer. Initially, yes, you were on the same path and encourage these Filipino manufacturers. But unfortunately, para pong nabitiwan mo yung bola, napunta na lang sa PSDBM, puro na lang Chinese suppliers, and these are not manufacturers. These are suppliers. That is why a company like Pharmally made 10 billion in sales in 6 months' time.
Mr. Chairman, and then the irony po ngayon, Minority Floor Leader, si DTI tinutulungan nila na maghanap for export ng PPEs natin kasi hindi natin binibili. So, for export na lang.
Yeah. Yun nga, yun ang malungkot, Minority Leader and Senator Binay. In fairness to SecMon, he's been, even before the pandemic, he was already pushing. Yes. He already had the number of programs in place, like the Go Local.
Yes.
And I told him, let's push it even further by making more sophisticated, products. But yun nga, how do we afford all these provisions in law? That's why the Senate relaxed the procurement in Bayanihan in order, because in acknowledgement, number one, it was an emergency, and second, there is this provision that Filipino-made goods will be given priority. And but sige, Sec, I will give you a chance to respond.
Yes, and Mr. Secretary, you're a member of the board of GPBB. Hindi po ba?
Wala na po GTB.
GPPB.
Ano na?
Government. Yeah,
So how
GPPB. Sorry. Kala ko GTB.
member of the board? Yes.
Oh, Mr. Chair. Oo, so I have similar frustration kasi tinulungan natin mag-produce locally, wanting to have domestic capacity. But following the discussion, Mr. Chair, totoo yun, sana nga, because sa Bayanihan 2, may preference sa domestic manufacturing, which you appreciate. But I think, unfortunately, the 15% premium was not enough. Parang talagang malaking mura, hindi kami part kasi ng procurement, but parang mas malaking mura yata at that time yung mga sinosource nila. And I don't know what happened really. We're not part of the discussion. We're just learning it also now kung yung sa mga based on the hearing. But what I was proposing, Mr. Chair, para nga moving forward talaga, sana kung mayroong mga government-sponsored program like repurposing and all that, if we can have really, I don't know if it's through a law na ang pwede lang mag-bid local. As in talagang buy local. Kasi ngayon po, under the flag law, may 15% pa na hurdle. At pag mas mura yung imported more than 15%, I think it will win the bid. So that's what we learned also from GPPB when we were asking around. But I hope because of the 9184, there should be a provision that for government-sponsored program, I mean like this one, preference. Talagang wala na ibang bibili kundi local bidders lang ang pwede. I mean, hindi lang bidders, local manufacturers. Kasi pwedeng bidder, hindi naman pwede manufacture dito.
Alam mo, Mon, pwede namin gawin anumang batas ang gusto nyong gawin. Basta nakikita namin para sa kapakanan ng ating mga, let's say, local manufacturers. We give them all the incentives. This was a huge thing. And yet, the way it was implemented by the procurement service of the DBM, they just, pardon the word, but they screwed up everybody. Can you imagine, upon your encouragement, these Filipino manufacturers repurposed their capabilities, invested money. Tapos, because of the kalokohan dyan sa PSDBM, tingnan mo nangyari. They encouraged them to manufacture 100 million of these face masks at 1350. But after purchasing 25 million, 800,000 at 1350, ang ginawa the balance of 74 million to 35 na lang. Ano ba naman yan? No, I mean, no matter how you justify it, this cannot be justified, and the injustice done to our Filipino manufacturers is simply deplorable, and everyone is trying to defend this goddamn episode, this family, when in truth and in fact, nag-upisa yan sa PSDBM. And that's why I'm raising this question to you, because you're a member of the GPPB board, Mr. Secretary. It's quite unfortunate that this happened.
I don't know, Mr. Chair, kung was discussed in GPPB, but I think it went through the bidding procedure implemented by the procuring agency at the time. So I apologize, I'm not privy to what happened, Mr. Chair. Ang nangyari ngayon, Mr. Chair, nung dahil nag-produce na sila, ang ginagawa namin, tutulungan namin silang magbenta sa exports at saka sa mga local hospitals and mga health facilities. Kasi nahiya kami, nag-produce sila.
Yung point ni Senator Bina, it's like a comedy, di ba? Comedy naman yung ginagawa natin. Diba? Tinutulungan natin sila, pero we could help them so much directly.
Sana ho.
It's really that is why we are pushing hard in the Senate to go down to the bottom of this, because of this patent and injustice done to our local manufacturers. And we had hoped that you could raise your voice on this in defense of the manufacturers. Unfortunately, Secretary Lopez said that there is no overpricing, nothing is wrong with it, which is a little bit disappointing to me, because I expected you to fight for our Filipino manufacturers. They were encouraged by your encouragement to participate in this program, but they were naiwan sila sa left holding, as Senator Binay said, naiwan sila, wala silang maibentahan. Binili yung 74 million face mask from EMS, at 250 or 240 as against the representation of 1350. Ano ba naman yan? Hindi ba totally unjust ito? Would you agree that it is really unjust to our manufacturers what PSDBM did?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, kaya nga ho, to favor local manufacturers, sana nga ho, meron tayong, I mean, for me ho, my learning here is we should have really that rule or law that will compel
Our learning here, is that
buy local, go local.
yes, our learning is that when you have idiots like family people who are so greedy, that is where government should come in and slap their and put our foot down and say this is not right. But I have my impression of you, Mr. Secretary, is that you will fight for the Filipino businessman. In this particular case, mukhang wala po kayong nagawa. Mukhang pinabayaan nyo. Mukhang, you rightfully encourage them to participate. And then when they participated, niyari sila. I take that back. The other sectors of government took advantage of it and awarded to a company like Farmally with a capitalization of 625,000, 10 billion in contracts coming from China, and then the top 5 or so corporations are all foreign based, trading houses at that. Ano pa naman yan?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so I am one with you in preferring buying local, Mr. Chair, go local. So sana ho, mapanatili natin talaga yon sa mga programang ganito. Hindi ho kami kasi, unless we're part of the actual procurement system, yun nga, wala ho akong ma-contribute sa discussion.
I hope it does not happen again, but should a similar incident happen, I hope that you can make statements in support of the local manufacturers rather than these foreign traders, trading outfits, which has caused so much damage to our Filipino manufacturers. We expected you, Mr. Secretary, to stand for our local manufacturers. And I must be candid with you, you did not, you allowed these crooks to have their way, Mr. Secretary. It's quite unfortunate because you always have that projection as being helpful to our and protecting our Filipino manufacturers. But in this particular case, some stronger forces must have prevented you from fighting or making strong representations for our Filipino manufacturers, resulting in this fiasco.
Introduce naman natin sila. Yeah. Noted, Mr. Chair. We did our best. We introduced them sa DOH, sa lahat. Pero dun sa procedure, unfortunately, we've not been part of it. So, but I agree with the chair and your honors. DTI should really have a bigger push for these local manufacturers.
Yeah, all right. I hope that we have delivered a clear message, Mr. Chairman, to our Secretary of Trade and Industry.
I think we're preaching to the choir. I think we need to convert some other individuals, Mr. Minority Leader.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder kung hanggang ngayon ayaw pa din bumili ng PSDBM dito sa mga local manufacturers natin.
We can put something in the GAA, no? Hopefully it's not vetoed. It was, I think there was a conditional veto in the last year. In this year's budget, we inserted it on my and Senator Pangilinan's initiative to give preference to local producers in the procurement. Imagine how much the government purchases in 1 year. You know, that's
And Mr. Chairman,
tremendous amount.
actually, ang reklamo ng local manufacturers, well, dun sa PPE parang yung ginawa nilang PPE, level 5. Tapos ang ginawang standard lang na DOH and TSDBM, level 4 lang. So I mean, di ba, how can they compete dun sa price when technically it's two different products yung binibenta nila?
Right.
So for as long as may ganun discretion, talaga hindi ba kakakompete yung local manufacturers natin? Kasi nga, sa terms of reference, talagang meron ng may fini-favor na supplier.
Right.
Yeah.
Magtitinginan na lang tayo dito. Anyway, any other questions from my colleagues? You know.
Now, just
yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, Senator Jula.
No more question, and allow me to thank Secretary Lopez. I just have to express my very deep disappointment over what has transpired insofar as this face mask fiasco is concerned, and we do hope that next time, I hope it doesn't happen again, but we do hope that we can do more to protect our Filipino manufacturers rather than say hallelujah to the powers that be because of what justified this horrible incident. Mr. Chairman, yes.
Can we ask our resource persons to mute because there's some funny sounds coming out of their computers. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, yes. Secretary Lopez, you want to say something? No.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please, Secretary.
If I can just follow through with what the good senator mentioned, that if at all, maybe we can give another try of inserting this in the GAA to have a local preference, buying local, and para malinaw talaga nasa batas.
We will do that, Secretary, but you must talk to the DBM Secretary and your other colleagues. So it's not vetoed or at least subjected to a conditional veto. Yun ang importante, Secretary.
With all the protection or qualification.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, it is in Bayanihan too. The preference for Filipino manufacturers. It is
I was
already
referring to the one in the GAA because Bayanihan 2 is already expired. So that's water under the bridge, so to speak. But you're right, Minority Leader, it was not followed. But ito, I'm looking prospectively already, and giving the benefit of the doubt, even if we shouldn't.
Mr. Chair, baka if we can remove the 15% premium, of course, we leave it to the wisdom of the Senate on.
Hindi ba sa inyo galing yung 15%, Secretary?
Nasa flag law po, flag law.
Sa inyo galing yung 15%.
Nasa flag law po, Mr. Chairman. So, sa flag law, the old flag law. So, if we can remove that, para talaga, for certain programs, hindi naman lahat. Kasi, kung tatanungin niyo ako, sana kung lahat, pati infrastructure, ang laking budget, ang laking revival sa domestic demand, stimulating domestic demand if we just say buy local tayo ng construction materials. That's a big.
The problem is the problem in construction is the demand is the supply is not sufficient for the demand, Secretary.
Tama po. Kaya ho
so mahihirapan tayo diyan.
Yeah.
But in terms of other goods, it's the supply is sufficient. But sa construction, hindi nga di ba? Yan ang problema sa mga PPPs natin because that's why we want to open up certain areas because nga hindi kaya ng mga local conglomerates and companies.
Tama po. At saka actually, on the other side, may cost implication din. Of course, mapapamahal. So may cost additional cost to government, but that is one thing in promoting domestic demand. Maybe we can select programs with certain qualifications. Yun lang po, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, okay. The reason why I'm pounding on this, Mr. Secretary, apart from the fact that it really prejudiced our local manufacturers, is that the DTI secretary even said that there is no overpriced mask. You know, if you just look at the ability of the local manufacturers to supply at lower cost, half of it, half of the cost of farming, paano naman natin sasabihin na, okay, sige nga, siguro walang overprice, assuming so, but isn't that greed? Isn't that so acts which are prejudicial to our Filipino manufacturers? But anyway, we have expressed our opinion on this, and I do hope that we have delivered a clear message to the Secretary. Just one request, Mr. Chairman. The calendar shows that on October 13, the attached agencies of the DTI is going to come before the Finance Committee. Principally is TESDA, one of them. May I request for the October 13 hearing, we call PITC, Philippine International Trading Corporation, which is an agency under the DTI, a GOCC. So it does not get any budget from the general fund, but they receive billions of pesos from the general funds as a procurement agent similar to PSDBM. They are procurement agents for a number of government offices. Billions of pesos are in their coffers of PITC, and PITC is chaired by the good secretary, Secretary Lopez, and we would like to request that in the next hearing, PITC, being an attached agency of DTI, even if they don't have any budgetary allocation, be called before this committee as we have questions to ask. That is,
When is this minority leader? During the TESDA budget?
yes,
Sabay.
yes.
That's chaired by Senator Villanueva, so we'll ask Senator Villanueva's
Yes,
office.
because the TESDA, this October 13 would be for the attached agencies of the DTI, particularly TESDA, and there's another. There are two agencies that is
TESDA is under Senator Joel. APECO is under Senator Dick.
I see. So
two agencies under DTI that are not tackled
13,
under the DTI. Yes.
the October 13.
I will check with the COMSEC.
Yes, it's
COMSEC, the director of the LBRMO, si Director Irene. Can you
So-
ensure that PITC is present during the TESDA budget hearing chaired by Senator Joel? So, per the request of the minority leader. Irene,
Yes.
po, ma'am?
Yes, sir. October
Okay,
18 po.
18.
Ah,
October 18, Your Honor.
October 18. Yeah. Yes. What time would that be, sir?
What time,
11
Director?
11 a.m., sir.
11
Yeah.
a.m.
So October 18, 11 a.m.
Check, could you ensure that they're present
Yes.
on your end,
Request,
Mr. Secretary?
Secretary
Yes, sir.
Lopez on October 18 at 11 a.m. for the PITC questions that I
Yes.
want to raise.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, we have no more questions on the secretary. We have no objection to
Sir,
having
excuse
the
me.
budget,
I think the OIC of PITC is present now.
He's present now if you want to ask questions. Who is the OIC Director?
Kung nandyan yung OIC, si Christy Ibrega, if
Who is
the
it?
senator
I'm sorry.
has questions.
No, maybe we can have it on the 18th.
Kasi 18th na lang daw. Baka medyo mahaba. We've been meeting since 10 a.m. this morning, Secretary. So I
Yes,
can
sir.
understand how the minority leader feels.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Natutuling na kami sa mga charts na nababasa namin.
I was with the chairman at 10 a.m. ended at 1 p.m. Had my lunch with you at 2 p.m. So 5 p.m. siguro. So I'm already
It's been a full day. So yeah, we will accede to your request, minority leader.
Yes.
And we'll
But
schedule.
Mr. Chair, last.
18th. Yes, Secmon. Yeah.
Maybe just for the quick information of the chairman and the committee, we submitted already some updates from PITC, so hopefully it can help explain the status, and that will help in the discussion. sa
Yes,
October
thank you.
18.
Thank you. We'll
Salamat
make
po.
sure the minority leader gets that, so it may shorten his questioning. It may not. We'll
Yes,
see.
yes. If I can
Salamat
get
po.
that, that would be good.
Thank you.
Because
Senator Nancy, anything on your end before we let Secmon
Mr.
go?
Mr. Chairman, siguro on a happy note lang, can we just get an update dun sa Dubai Expo?
Okay.
Oh.
Kumusta na yung ano natin?
Yes, we're happy to note hindi na ho ako attend doon because of the prioritizing budget hearing. So it was open on October 1 or 2. The ambassador and our assistant secretary represented me, the opening. Huge opening. We had one of the smallest budget there, but we have a very good design because the design is a low-cost one. It's all basically all metals
Sinong
and
gumawa,
wires.
Secretary? Sinong gumawa?
Sila Royal Pineda, Architect Royal Pineda, Budgt partnership. And it's basically composed of wire mesh and all that, but it's very elegantly done. I will send pictures, reports, and it was attended by, I think, 3,000 plus kababayans, OFWs. The general sentiment, they're proud that we are represented there. Hindi lang nila alam kung gaano kamura yon compared to the setup. Billion yung setup ng mga ibang bansa na katabi natin, but sa atin dinaan natin sa space. And the theme is called Bangkota, which is coral reef. It is a coral reef depicts the lives of Filipinos. They're everywhere across the world. Na nakakalat ang mga coral reefs sa lahat sa buong mundo. So it's like the Filipino. So yun po ang design team noon. And a lot of we're partnered with NCCA, Cultural Center, and for all the activities. The SMEs are there for their products. May nakaschedule po National Day by February. That's the time we'll go there for investment mission na rin. So essentially po, we'll send the report and the pictures and the visuals.
Kailangan nyo ng kasama, Sec, ha? Baka
Yes, sir.
ni Senator Bina at saka si Senator Frank, baka
we have.
sumama dun sa... I'm just joking.
Yeah, yes, we'll do send the invite. At saka po, I think that's one of the biggest population, 700,000 UAE in Dubai. So we have something to be proud of there, Mr. Chair.
Is that the World Expo?
Yes, Mr. Chair. World Expo po yun, World Expo.
this is
I
in
remember
Doha.
we attended a World Expo in 2008 where our booth was designed by Ed Calma and we won one of the awards for best booth. It was also a nautical or a marine theme, water.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
This is the one in Doha, Mr. Secretary.
Dubai po, Dubai. Dubai, UAE.
Dubai. Okay.
So we'll send the report.
Please share some pictures of the exhibits.
Yes.
Please ask your staff so our countrymen can be proud and when they see it online, Mr. Secretary.
Opo. Pati ho yung YouTube and all the feedback ng kababayan natin who were there.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Sen Nancy. Are you satisfied, Your Honors? So we can let the Secretary go.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Secretary Mon, and to the DTI family. And this is a much improved presentation, and we appreciate the.
Nahiya po kami sa Finance Committee. Gusto namin ma-address yung inyong katanungan. Ayan, todo research.
Yeah. Well, we thank the Minority Leader for setting high standards, and Senator Binay also for always fighting for our local producers. So thank you, Secmon, and to the DTI family and the attached agencies and to our colleagues, Minority Leader and Senator Nancy. Thank you very much, Your Honors. Wish you a good afternoon. Salamat, Secmon.
Thank you
Ingat
po.
po.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senators.
Good afternoon to everyone, Your Honors. Thank you. Ingat po.
Salamat.
Thank you to our